Hi guys, my name's Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran, and an ever-Trump Republican. I like breaking down the internet, alt media, news, politics du jour, and the next element of psychic damage that I have for you is going to be wonderful. It's Candace Owens, somebody who I viscerally hate, talking to Nick Fuentes, somebody I enjoy, but hate his politics. And he actually hurts me whenever he talks for prolonged periods. So expect me to pause every few minutes and like grimace as if a blood vessel within my brain is going to rupture. Expect that for the next few minutes of content. Let's go ahead and bring on these creators. Candace Owens is in my opinion, a conservative grifter who has actually fallen down the rabbit hole. Nick the Knife Fuentes is a Christian nationalist, dissident, right-wing creator and believes everything he says. So I think as much as his politics are extreme, I do think he is a believer.
You talk a lot of
I do.
You absolutely talk a lot of about me included. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to invite you onto the podcast.
True.
A lot of your videos have been going viral. Obviously, it will not surprise you to learn that according to the media, you might be the most evil person in the world.
They say that about me, yes. That's my reputation.
Definitely anti-Semitic, racist, right. Misogynist. There have been real fears of people speaking about your groyper movement. So I did something before this interview is I went back into my phone and wrote Nick Fuentes. I wanted to try to remember the first time that I actually heard your name. And it was in 2019, a text message that somebody had shared with me that Ashley St. Clair had been kind of fired from Turning Point USA. And this person was speaking about Ashley St. Clair and had mentioned that she got in trouble a while back or whenever it happened because she took a photo with you and that you were this big anti-Semite. And then later that year, I had a conversation.
That's funny. Isn't Ashley St. Clair, is she the one who got pregnant by Elon Musk? Ashley St. Clair, Elon Musk. No way. No way. God, being a conservative grifter has to be so easy. Gosh darn it. Why didn't I do this? Why wasn't I a hot girl in conservative media who could have a billionaire's baby and get tens of millions of dollars for the rest of my life? Why didn't that happen? Nick Fuentes, Ashley St. Clair. That's so funny because if she was at TP USA, she must have been pretty young at the time. Here's Nick Fuentes. I think Ashley's back here. Third from left. 1, 2, 3. Oh, she's short then. She's crazy short because I don't think Nick's that tall. So this was her in her college days. In her college days, she was hanging out with Nick Fuentes in TP USA. And then she became a conservative grifter. Then she had Elon Musk's baby. Oh, yeah. Ashley St. Clair's in the back. Never mind. She's taller. This is Adrienne DeCoco. This is Ashley St. Clair. That's what I thought. All right, anyways. Good for her. Good for her to grift and get the bag, I guess. You want to have a Nazi's baby, Connor? Well, for a few $1,000,000, sure.
About the groypers, it was something that I had never seen before, who were showing up on college campuses and asking questions about conservatism to various speakers, whether it was Rob Smith, Dave Rubin, and asking, hey, if we're conservatives, why are we promoting gay people?
Right.
Because as we all know, conservatism has everything to do with biblical sexual morality and nothing to do with, I don't know, politics.
You're the person that is the face of that movement. So
yes.
Can you just tell me, I guess, a little bit about Nick Fuentes before the groyper movement?
Sure. Well, yeah, that was my big claim to fame. That was kind of when I came on the map in 2019.
The first groyper war. I was there for that.
But before that, I was at RSBN, Right Side Broadcasting Network. I was a freshman in college. I was 18 years old. I was at Boston University, and I was a big pro-Trump guy, and I was very into politics, extremely political. But like a lot of people, I was pretty mainstream. I was very pro-Israel, libertarian, big PragerU viewer, Ben Shapiro fan, all that kind of stuff. But of course, in 2016, everything changed.
And then he's like, this is lame. I'm going to go do my own thing and become a Christian nationalist, similar to the Christian nationalists of the 1930s Germany. Yeah, nice.
Had the rise of the alternative right.
And by the way, if you're a groyper and you're like, oh, Connor's just moral frogging, like, no, this is descriptively true.
And so it's guys like Jordan Peterson and Stefan Molyneux and Richard Spencer and Jared Taylor. And of course, Trump being the king of them all. So in 2016, everything changed. I became very racialist, very pro-white, very critical of Israel, very aware of the Jewish phenomenon that's happening in the country. And so I went to the college campus. I was freshman, 18, and I did a big debate with the student body president at the school. And it was kind of weird how it came together. I was pretty vocal on Twitter, didn't have a big following, maybe 200 followers, but I was wearing a MAGA hat everywhere I went. Cafeteria, to class, down the street. And I became known on the campus as that guy wearing the MAGA hat. And I would go on Twitter and I'd talk about my experience. People are picking on me. People are saying they were going to beat me up. People are threatening me, stuff like that. And I said, I was defiant. I was very pro-Trump in spite of all that. And so I got a lot of flack from the liberals on the campus, the Democrats, and one of these groups, Young Americans for Liberty, they came in and contacted me and said, would you want to set up a debate on the campus with one of your detractors, one of the people that's threatening you, trying to fight you? And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. I had been a broadcaster in high school, so I said, yeah.
We're getting into the early lore, and we might have to break this up into multiple segments just because I think Justin says the end is really good, but if the entire content throughout is really good, I'm going to want to respond to the vast majority of the thing. Sorry for being out of breath, but I am lifting weights. Omnigunny says, just joining in. Nice to see you're getting consistently around 100 viewers now. We need to increase that like to view ratio. Omnigunny is correct. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat. There's lots of funny, interesting people. Donate a super chat if you got it. Become a member if you can. Watch the VODs and comment on the VODs so I get that sweet, sweet AdSense revenue. I parasocially love you. Thank you for being here and pissing me off in the chat section so I can spurg out. In reference to what he's saying so far, it just seems like it's his origin story, so I don't have very much criticism at this point.
Let's set something up. And so they put out like an open casting call. They contacted a bunch of the people that had been talking trash about me, and they said they'd like to set up this debate, and they found the student body president. He was like a senior, and he was like some Democrat socialist or something, and I didn't even know the guy. But they set up this live event and like 300 students came to it. It was like a big deal. And actually someone Cassie Dillon, who's now known as Cassie Akiva, at that time she was a fellow at Daily Wire. She was like, I guess she was working there temporarily. They had taken her to Israel. She had been there a few times and she was studying at Mount Holyoke in Western Massachusetts. And she was involved with some of the campus groups. So she went to the event. And she live streamed it on Periscope at that time. And I didn't even know her. I had heard about her. I had seen her on Twitter. And when the debate finished, she came up to me and she said, oh my gosh, I just streamed that. You had 30,000 people watching.
Nice. That's really good numbers for a random college debate.
She goes, Ben Shapiro watched it. Milo Yiannopoulos watched it. She said, and you've got a bunch of different job offers. And we do a little post-game interview. She's asking me questions. And the last question she asked me, which is like the big setup for my whole life.
How do you feel about Jewish people? How do you feel about the state of Israel? I have no idea if that's where it's going to be. We'll see. We'll see. Hi, Vlad. Good to see you, buddy.
She said, I just got back from Israel. She said, would you ever take a trip to Israel? Because I think.
No way.
You'd love it and so on. And, I sort of knew what was happening with Israel, but not 100%. And I said, yeah. And I said, it sounds interesting, but I think I have everything I need right here in America. And she goes, oh, okay. She wraps up the interview and she gives me her card. We exchange information. I get involved with her. She was involved with RSBN. And if you know, that's Right Side Broadcasting Network. They did all the Trump rallies during the election. And when the election ended, they said they were going to start up a bunch of original programming. They had Mike Cernovich, Bill Mitchell, a bunch of these guys that were on Twitter.
Well, hold on. So Groovy McCrout says, Nick feels he's entitled to appear on people's shows, but won't ask to appear on them. Make it make sense. No. So what, I don't know how he schedules. I don't know how he books. Typically what I see is he pisses people off on Twitter enough, and then he gets invited onto the shows for debates or whatever. But I think Nick is descriptively, it's okay to admit that a lot of people view him as politically toxic. It's like touching a social pariah. That's why the Dinesh D'Souza, Alex Jones debate was actually kind of a shock and frankly good content. But with Nick, he's so extreme that a lot of people don't want to be viewed as palling around with him. If they want to talk to him, they want it to be contentious. And the truth is that Nick's a good debater. He's a good debater. He's an intelligent guy. He has a command of a lot of facts. His politics are abhorrent, but that doesn't mean he's not competent. And so I think that his clout, if he actually is getting, 5 to 20,000 live, I don't know what his live numbers are on Cozy or his live numbers are, but the truth is that I think there's tens of thousands of people who watch him live, and I think there's hundreds of thousands of people who watch his post-recorded content. So he, while being banned from the major platforms, he's a contender with Hassan, with Vosh, with Destiny. So, he should be up there, but he's persona non grata because his politics are so extreme.
And she had a show, it's called Raised Right. And so she contacted Joe Seals, who's at RSBN, and she said, I saw this guy give the speech. He's really great. He debated this guy on campus. We should give this guy a show. And so I got in touch with them. We got to talking. This was around the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. They said,
yeah, Justin says he averages 15K a night on Rumble. Yeah, so even if you're saying those numbers are inflated, let's say that Rumble numbers are 2x. And by the way, I'm not saying they're 2x. Okay, I'm not saying they're 3x. Okay, I have no idea what Rumble's numbers are, but let's even presume that they're inflated. Okay, if they were double, that would still be 7,500 viewers, which would put him in the top 1% of streamers. If they were triple, he would still be getting 5,000 viewers, which is in the top 1% of streamers. So no matter how you cut it, no matter what shenanigans are going on in the background, he's in the top 1% of streamers no matter what.
What do you want to call your show? I said, well, let's call it the Nicholas J. Fuentes Show. They said, that's too long. Nobody knows who you are. We don't want that. I said, okay. They said, you need a different name. I said, all right. So I watched the Trump inauguration, which was January 17. And he said in the speech, a new vision will govern our land. It's going to be only America first. And I said, I like the sound of that. I said, we'll call it America First.
So question, how old are you exactly at this time?
I was 18.
18. Okay, so all of this sort of happened 17, 18 years old, or this all happened very quickly at the age of 18?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and it all happened rapidly, and this was a time when I was still even figuring out what I'm about, because I'm a teenager. And I've been extremely political since I was like 12 years old. I read Thomas Sowell, Milton Friedman, all that stuff, all the libertarian, conservative stuff, even a lot of the neocon stuff, honestly. I was kind of all over the place. And I started to get red-pilled. I started to go on 4chan. I started to go on far-right Twitter. I started to get into some of these more interesting ideas. And I wasn't sold yet. That's sort of the thing, is I was sort of in this questioning phase, not sort of innuendo, but questioning, my political ideology. Like, I had these libertarian priors, and I had this kind of pro-Israel bent because that's just what there was on the internet at that time. All of the online content, it was PJ Media, which was Shapiro and Bill Whittle and Andrew Klavan. It was PragerU, Breitbart. That's what there was. But then in 2016, you had this alt-right movement, and suddenly you had all these other people that were.
Yeah, so Vlad says an important comment, okay? Is my man Lifton? I respect it. Yes. Okay, so we have 110 people, so I'm going to shill real quick. Like the stream, super chats, memberships, engage in chat, comment for the comment gods on the VODs, okay? Also, I don't want to be like all these other streamers who become like little husk shrimp people over time. I do want to be relatively fit. I have a family. So I lift weights. Today is triceps and chest. So I'll be doing 3 by 3 by 10, 10 reps, 3 sets, 3 different exercises for triceps, 10 reps, 3 sets, 3 different exercises for chest. So I'm just using dumbbells. It's nothing crazy, but I encourage you, if you're a dude, you're out of shape, you're not doing great, you're chilling at your IT job, you're kind of fat, start lifting dumbbells. It's going to help. I promise.
In the conversation, like I said, these guys like Jared Taylor and Sam Francis and a whole other crew. And so I really was open-minded and questioning what I really believe. And so that's really when I came into conflict with this establishment, you know, something that I sort of began to figure it out and started to pay the price for this line of inquiry. Vlad
says, can y'all join the channel on YouTube? I don't know if memberships are turned on. I'll just go ahead and text Philip right now.
So that first conversation I had with Cassie Dillon, it prefigured kind of like...
Herkimer says, you should make an exercise video for desk jockeys. I don't know what to do. Yeah, I got you. Herkimer, please remind me. I will actually do that. Just Carpet says, tries for the guys, Chief. Listen, man, one of my favorite moments in my physical fitness journey was I was in Iraq. I was deployed. I was on a base called Al-Assad. And so I was actually able to work out 6 times a week. And a dude walks up and smacks my arm and he goes, I really like what you did with your triceps. It was awesome. Gayest moment of my life. A memory that I will think about on my deathbed.
My entire adult life until this point. And at that time, in the early months of the Trump admin, I was doing some digging on the Israel situation. And there were some notable news stories with Obama and then with Trump that made me ask some questions. You know, in December of 2016, during the lame duck, Obama declined to veto in the Security Council a resolution condemning the settlements in the West Bank.
I'm just gonna let this play. I understand it's like a little dry little intro or whatever, but I don't mind hearing the lore of Nick Fuentes from Nick Fuentes' perspective.
And everybody called him a Jew hater for doing that. They said he was an anti-Semite. And I said, well, wait a second. And I was a big conservative. I didn't like Obama. But I said, wait a second. I said, it is the official policy of the United States since 1967 that we're against the civilian settlements. Every president, Republican and Democrat, I said, and all Obama did, he didn't even vote no. He didn't veto it. He didn't vote in favor. They voted present, and they allowed the resolution to pass. I said, that's consistent with our government's policy, the American policy. Obviously, Israel and America don't have the same policy on everything. I said, but now you have Fox News and Mark Levin and all the usual suspects are saying he's an anti-Semite and a Jew hater because he merely advanced our own position. I said, isn't that a bit of a double standard? Isn't that hypocritical? I said, and you know what it sounds like? It sounds like the left. You disagree with the left on race, and they say you're a racist. You disagree with the left on Islam, you're an Islamophobe, and all the rest of it. And so that was something that really set off an alarm bell. I said, something's not right here. And I wrote a big article about it on my blog. A couple months later, guess who comes to town for Trump's first visit from a foreign leader? It's Bibi Netanyahu. That was the first foreign leader that he hosted at the White House. And Netanyahu goes up there. They do a joint press conference. And Trump turns to him and says, I need you to take it easy on those civilian settlements in the West Bank, because it's a big liability for us. Netanyahu goes home and authorizes the largest expansion of the settlements in Israel's history.
Wait, that's super interesting. Is that on camera?
Yes.
And secondly, on the settlement issue, are you both on the same page?
As far as settlements, I'd like to see you hold back on settlements for a little bit. We'll work something out, but I would like to see a deal be made. I think a deal will be made. Bibi and I have known each other a long time. A smart man, great negotiator. And I think we're going to make a deal. It might be a bigger and better deal than people in this room even understand. That's a possibility. So let's see what we do.
The deal is I look the other way.
That's right.
Doesn't sound too optimistic, but that's he's a good negotiator.
That's the art of the deal.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's pretty obscure because, you know, if you're not watching this stuff day by day, it kind of slips through the cracks. But that was the first foreign visit. I remember it very distinctly. And so I said to Cassie Dillon,
So you're just more dialed into it at this time, because I was paying attention to politics, definitely, obviously, because I was kind of getting kicked over the BLM stuff, but I would have never tuned into that because we weren't really confronted with the alliance as much in
Right.
2016. But you're kind of dialed in and you notice this moment, and BB just kind of says F you to Trump and proliferates it further.
right, exactly. And I was paying attention because I was really big into foreign affairs. I was a big model UN kid in high school. That was like my thing. So I was really focused on all that. And I just pay attention. I ask questions. I noticed the patterns, so to speak. And so I had, at that point,
General So says, I thought Nick hated Candace. I mean, he probably does to some degree, but let's face it, they're going to have a lot of audience crossover. So them working together, even on a limited basis, is probably good for both of them. Candace, for God's sake, Candace Owens interviewed Harvey Weinstein in order to try to sanitize his image in public. I think Candace believes her own BS, but I do think she's a clout shark. And the truth is that Nick carries a lot of weight in the dissident right. As a matter of fact, out of all the dissident right-wing people, Jared Taylor is old as hell, and he has the explicit... was Jared Taylor a member of the KKK? I forget if Jared Taylor was a member of the KKK, but he was like the ultimate racialist guy, but he's got to be in his 60s now. Jared Taylor, KKK. Was he ever a member? There was some guy. It might not have been Jared Taylor. It might have been a different guy. But there was some guy who was like popular in this movement who was a member of the KKK at one point. But Jared Taylor age, he's very polite. Yeah, he's 73, dude. He's old as shit. Richard Spencer is 47, which is funny because now he's old as hell. But Richard Spencer flamed out, destroyed his movement. So he's got Jared Taylor's old. Richard Spencer flamed out. Milo Yiannopoulos flamed out. Gavin McInnes flamed out. And he was more libertarian than he was dissident right or ethno-nationalist anyways. And so as a result, yeah, Nick's the last man standing. David Duke. Thank you. My apologies for mixing up Jared Taylor and David Duke. But David Duke's got to be old as shit as well. David Duke age was born in 50. So what is he? 75 years old? 74, 75? So yeah, David Duke was a head of the KKK, and he's been a part of the dissident right, alt-right for a long time. But David Duke is 75. So all the old school dissident right-wing people, they're either old as shit or they flamed out.
I became friends with all the Daily Wire people. There was Cassie Dillon, this writer named Elliot Hamilton, a writer named Aaron Bandler. Those guys were Jewish, and I think they had visited Israel a lot. They were involved in Jewish.
Jared Taylor was raised in Japan. Listen, guys, that explains a lot. He was like, this is nice. He's like, ethno-homogenous, ethno-supremacist, ethno-monocultural ordered society. This is nice. And then he just came home and he was like, this is a mess. I wish white people in America were like Japanese people in Japan. Minus the anime and the hentai.
Groups. I thought they were my friends, and they were talking about, they were setting me up with a writing gig at Daily Wire. They basically did like a preliminary interview. They wanted me to work over there.
Yeah, but then they found out about like the antipathy towards Jews, and they were like, pass.
And I did a lot of collaborations with them. I gave them interviews for articles because I was like a campus teen that was pro-Trump and all that. It was big fodder at that time for the culture war stuff. And then I started asking them. I said, why does the United States give Israel $3.8 billion per year? Because
I do want to address this momentarily, but Old School says, Connor, didn't you miss Pat Buchanan? Yeah, Pat Buchanan. And Pat Buchanan actually philosophically was one of the people who really argued for a more isolationist foreign policy within the United States. And I think a lot of the dissident right wing and the MAGA movement took a lot of philosophical things from Pat Buchanan. But sorry for the deep breath. Again, lifting weights and eating food and talking to you folks. But with Pat Buchanan, what's interesting about him is I tried to read A Republic, Not an Empire. I got 40% of the way through it. And I got to say, I was bored out of my fucking mind. It was actually, it's not whether or not he was saying was like coherent or logical or based in history or something like that. But it was basically like the neocons and the neolibs have run away with the economics and the politics of the day. They're really popular because people like, the abundance agenda of the neolib. Like, clearly he wasn't writing about abundance because this was written a long time. But he was like, people like the laissez-faire economics of the neoliberals, and people love the wealth generated by neoconservative interventionism. But effectively what's going on is we're building an unsustainable empire that will ultimately collapse the United States of America, and the Republican ideals for which we were founded that were based on Christian conservatism will die with the Republic unless we change course abruptly. I just summarized. I probably spent 2-3 hours listening to A Republic, Not an Empire. I just summarized like 3 hours for you in 45 seconds. It was exhausting. And I still had 60% left of the book to go. It was a slog.
At that point, the new MOU had just passed, a new memorandum of understanding. That's the foreign aid for Israel. And they actually increased it. And they expanded it for 10 years. So I said, why are they the #1 recipient of foreign aid? I said, they're not a poor country.
Because we want them to use our money. We want them to buy our weapons from the military-industrial complex. Then we want to test them in Israel for the benefit of our military-industrial complex.
And I don't even really know what the strategic value is there. I said, so why, since 1978, uninterrupted, have they been #1? And #2 and #3, it's the same story. It's Egypt and Jordan. They're the second and third biggest
and we're buying them off so they don't attack Israel.
Recipients. And we basically pay them because they normalized relations with Israel. It's like a bribe. I said, so, what do you make of this whole arrangement? I said, is it because they are our closest ally and I'm missing something? I said, or are we being lobbied? And there's this deep contradiction and double standard, and it's obviously being enforced by foreign influence and money. And I remember they hated the line of questioning.
And when you say they, you're referring to this friend group?
Yes.
Okay.
This Daily Wire friend group, they were all writers there, and you could still find their articles online. And they, at first it was sort of playful. They said, oh, haha, very good. They almost thought I was joking. They said, oh, it's very funny, but you really shouldn't ask that, they would say. They'd say, there's a good answer for all those questions. They'd say, but the
LB, how are they buying the weapons if we're already paying for them, for fuck's sake? Well, #1, the Jews are incredibly good at negotiation. #2, what we're trying to do is we're trying to keep them in our orbit, because the truth is that while half of the Jewish population is in the United States of America, they could technically go into China's orbit because China is technologically very sophisticated. And so the truth is, #1, they could sell their technology and our military industrial technology to China. So we don't want that to happen. #2, we don't want them to fall into China's orbit. So we're basically paying them to remain our friends.
Way you're asking it is anti-Semitic, they said. And, we're happy to talk with you one-on-one in person. Like they're going to teach me how to ask the question. They said, because the way you're saying it, it sounds hateful and it's wrong. And I said, I'm asking a question. It's free marketplace of ideas, I thought. So I kept pushing and pushing, and I was tugging on a lot of these different threads.
Was that racist about Jews? Probably. But let's face it, most Jews I know are pretty smart, and a healthy chunk of them are good at negotiation. Some of them actually aren't smart. I know at least 2 Jews who are not very smart, and they're also terrible at negotiation. But all the other ones were pretty smart.
Also asking about World War II and about some of the narratives there. And I was asking about 9/11 and the Iraq War.
And where are you asking this?
Conservative liberalism says we're paying for them to be our friends, basically a hostage situation. Neat. I hope we do that forever. Who gives a shit? It's what is it? $3.8 billion. This is like paying somebody $5 to help out with your bake sale. It's like, hey, I want you to buy from my bake sale. Here's $5 to help me up with the bake sale. 3.8 billion. 3,800,000,000 divide by 6,000,000 million billion trillion 1,000 million billion trillion. It's 6.3 to the e to the -4. So this is nothing. This is piss in the ocean. If you're like, well, we could be spending $6 billion on domestic infrastructure. Oh, okay, let's just spend $6 billion on domestic infrastructure. We don't need to cut it here. Okay. 6.33 e to the -4 is not something that I'm concerned about from the budget perspective. LB says, is it because they're Jewish, are just better educated? Yeah. And I'm going to say another anti-Semitic trope. All the dumb ones are dead. Okay. So if you look at, this is a joke from Eric Weinstein, by the way. Basically, he was saying in the Passover, the whole point of Passover is to remind Jewish people that the people who waited for the bread to rise when they were cooking food in order to escape the land of Egypt, all of them are enslaved or dead. And so the Jewish culture is based around effectively like a series of international horror shows where they get enslaved and killed, enslaved and killed, enslaved and killed, enslaved and killed. And so over time, the lackadaisical Jews are the ones who got wiped out. So, you know, you can say that's anti-Semitic, Connor, but realistically, that's from Eric Weinstein. I'm just stealing his quote. This is happening, says, that's how hegemony works. If liberal democracies don't do it, then China and Russia and Iran will. Yup. AKA Badasoy says, we are paying Israel for intelligence as well that they collect in the region. Yup. Justin says, Qatar has a big affinity for Jews. Yup. Conservative liberalism says, influence flowing in the other direction is what concerns me. Thankfully, we all learned the Epstein thing is a nothing burger the day before Bibi showed up for the 3rd time in this one term. Yeah. Listen. If Jeffrey Epstein was exclusively selling his power and leverage to the Israeli Mossad, I would be pissed off. If he was also selling it to the CIA, then I would be like, all right. Like, yeah. This is not happening, says, but morons want a multipolar world because Russia bought farms and Assad made that sound good. Yeah, what an idiot. Or spend $6 billion on the VA. Why don't we spend $6 billion on the VA anyways? Herkimer says $4 billion. You think that's bad? Better not take a look at the new immigration cop budget. Yeah, exactly. The Bible is a lie, Connor. No, it's not. Take your cringe. Stop doing the cringe fedora thing, LB. Become more sophisticated in your religious analysis. It's exhausting. Sacred Snow says that joke is Stein/Berg approved. Good. Groovy McCrout says, why is everyone worried about China, Iran, and North Korea? I think the country we should be worried about is Germany, declared war on the world twice in 20 years. Fatsimo says, who enslaved them where they had to kill a bunch of Hellenized Jews and Roman citizens so we could celebrate Hanukkah today? Yeah, exactly. The Persians, hold on, the Babylonians conquered them and enslaved them. The Egyptians obviously enslaved them at some point. The Persians enslaved them at some point. The Greeks conquered them and the Romans conquered them, and then the Christians conquered them, and then the Muslims conquered them again. Like, Jewish history is effectively the history of getting your ass kicked for being in the, you know, at the crossroads of humanity. Sneaky Elbow says, if a country has your guns, does that mean that they have to use your ammo? Yup. Sure does. Sure does. And then not just that. I was thinking about this because I was wondering why we were giving them $3.8 billion in a direct subsidy so they could purchase different weapons and defense tech. And then I realized, like, you know, like, why don't we just give them the weapons? And then I realized, like, well, the Israelis might have a preference on which things they want to get. So by giving them the cash, but then providing the market of the military industrial complex, if they want anti-riot technology one year, they can buy anti-riot technology. If they want drone technology, they can buy drone technology. If they want artificial intelligence technology, they can buy artificial intelligence technology. And so by giving them the flexibility of having the cash instead of just the tech, they can, through market resource, incentivize the tech that is most needed for operations in the Middle East and North Africa. So that's what I thought. LB says, did I hurt your soul, Cotter? Relax, you don't have one. Oh my God. Take your fedora off when you enter the chat. Anyways, back to it. Justin says Connor would get really rich being a Zionist politician in Florida. We're working on it, brother.
Are you in a group chat? Are you just face to face, like with your friends eating a burger? Like where, when you say,
do you guys care if I fast forward 20 minutes? Like, I like the Nick origin story, but I don't need all of it. You know what I'm saying? You tell me. Gray Jedi says, if Jews are so smart, wouldn't there be a ton of Israel-based defense corps? There are. They probably have the second most complex military-industrial complex after the United States.
I keep asking these questions. What's the setup for that?
We're texting in group chats.
Never mind. I want to lift weights, so I'm just going to listen.
And we're even doing it one-on-one. You know, one of the venues, we had a big Christmas party out in Western Massachusetts, and Cassie Dillon invites me back to her apartment with a couple of friends, and everyone's drinking wine. I don't drink, so I wasn't drinking, but we're playing apples to apples, and it's a party atmosphere. You know, we're friends, we're having fun, we're political, we're talking about it. And this is the venue. And it just got increasingly cold over time. And it turned into stop. Like, you need to stop asking or else. And eventually, you know, I kept pushing on a lot of these different things. And Cassie hits me up on Twitter. And she texts me this huge block text paragraph. And she says, you know, we're not in the same movement anymore. She goes, I don't really recognize what you're about and your views. She says, I'm pro-Israel. She goes, and the things you're asking, the things you're saying about Ben Shapiro and other people, she goes, you know, I'm just not a part of that movement. And she said, so we can't be friends anymore. So she stops talking to me, cuts me off completely. All the other people block me. Elliot, Aaron, there were some other people involved. They all blocked me on Twitter, complete ghosting. And I'm shocked. I'm floored. You know, this is my first encounter with this kind of pushback, you know, because you go into it as an 18-year-old in college, and you get involved in these groups. I was involved in the Trump campaign, YAL, all these groups.
Real quick, Herkimer says, did you hear that Orange Diddy is sending more Patriot missiles to Ukraine? You think he's trying to take heat off of the files? No, I think he's legitimately pissed off at Putin. I think that he actually thought that Putin was going to come to the table to give him a W. And since Putin is not coming to the table, he wants to punish him. That's what I think is going on.
And you think this is the free marketplace. We're here to debate ideas. It's, you know, it's a free speech atmosphere. And I'm also thinking we're all pro-Trump. And that's another big dimension of this is me. Trump was a huge influence on me. He made me a nationalist when I was a conservative. And America First was that operative.
Fatsimo says, it's such a cope to think the money is being used on U.S. markets. There's no way to know where the money goes because of how Israel gets the money given to them. Fatsimo, I'm sure that that is almost entirely incorrect. I am almost guaranteeing that the 3.8 billion, what was it, 3.3, 3.2, has to be spent on U.S. defense contractors. I'm almost guaranteeing you that's the entire point of the deal.
Phrase, you know, I wasn't any longer a small government, you know, constitutional individualist. I said, I'm America first. I'm about America. And so there's this deep contradiction on the Trump strain in particular and what they're pushing. And I said, it really shouldn't be there. If we're America first on China, Mexico, Russia, everybody else, NATO, why aren't we America first on Israel? So this.
AF says, Connor would love it if you did insult people who don't subscribe to your JBB take on the Bible. It's super cringe. No. And AF, I love you. But fuck you. Take your fedora off.
Was deeply disconcerting and weird and disturbing to me. And I was honestly just taken aback. I was like, why are my friends now turning their back on me because of a disagreement? Well, fast forward, I'm doing my show on RSBN. This is in my second semester. So this is winter and spring 2017.
Listen, Fatsimo says sane cope for why we give the next money to Egypt and Jordan. Do you guys want diplomacy or not? What do you want? You're so mad about giving money to like other countries or whatever in order to make sure that they have strong diplomatic relations that don't result in war. And then when we go to war, you're mad. Like, pick one, bro. Like, the whole point of diplomacy is to avoid war. I think in 67 and 73, like, let me take a look. What wars did Egypt involve itself in? Google, what wars did Egypt attack Israel? So 73. So they were involved in 67, they were involved in 73, they were involved in 48. What wars did Jordan attack Israel? I almost guarantee you it's going to be the same thing. 48 and 67. Jordan also had limited involvement in 1973. So, dude, you're acting like, oh man, we're costing the taxpayer $6 billion a year in order to pay. I'm gonna pay you $100 to fuck off. This is the meme, okay? This is it. This is the United States. And we're saying, in order to avoid war that destabilizes the oil market, I'm going to pay you $100 to fuck off. And you're like, I don't want to pay them $100 to fuck off. Well, the alternative is we fight. So how about we just pay them $100 to fuck off? It's cheaper and it's less bloody. Christmas says, how dare you have opinions that aren't my own? What are you, some kind of flawed human? True, exactly. Groove McCrout says, pro tip, don't be the guy at the Christmas party that keeps talking about Jews, Hitler, ethno-religious wars in the Middle East, etc. It will be pulling the ladies. Yeah. What's the they don't know meme? This is Nick. This is Nick at the Daily Wire writing party. Everybody else is playing apples to apples and drinking and dancing and having a good time. And Nick's like, they don't know that the Jews control America. Oh, this is awesome. Who cares? How is that America's problem? We like oil. Do you like oil? I like oil. Oil's great. Did you already skip 20 minutes like the intro is so slow? No. Gray Jedi says, Connor, people forget that spice must flow. Literally. Yes, actually. Analogize this to the Dune movies and you'll understand it perfectly. Boris says Barbary Wars, the U.S. preferred war over paying off the Muslim pirates. Yeah, and then what did we do? We went to the Ottoman princes and we said, hey, control your fucking pirates. And the Ottoman princes said, only if you help us. And then we helped the Ottoman princes. So yeah, so your options are war or paying people to fuck off. So paying people to fuck off, for all the pacifists in chat, those are your options. Pick one.
And I'm doing the show. The show's going okay. I'm not getting great viewership. Nobody was. And I get a call from my boss, Joe Seals, who runs RSBN. And he goes, you got to keep this between us. He says, but did something happen between you and Cassie? Because she's still doing her show too. I said, yeah, we had this falling out, blah, blah, blah. He goes, she's been calling me every day for the past 2 weeks. He goes, and she's telling me, well, Nick said this on his show. Isn't that so racist? Nick said this on his show. Isn't that so hateful? That's not conservative. He says, and she's been trying to get you fired, calling me literally every day for 2 weeks. I said, wow. I said, I can't say I'm surprised. I said, she gave me this very cold, standoffish thing.
Well, QC John, it's kind of funny thinking Casey Dillon had given Fuentes a kiss. The world the world may not know him as we know him. Yeah, dude. Casey Dillon could have jumped on a political grenade for all of us. And instead, she created the king of Christian nationalists, volcels and incels. Casey Dillon, conservative commentator. What? Why'd that happen? Let's see. I'm actually unfamiliar with Casey Dillon. Is this her? Cassie Dillon. Dude, this girl could have saved us all. This girl could have destroyed America first. She could have saved us, but she actively chose not to. Casey, you were the chosen one.
You know, she blocked me, all the rest. He goes, not only that, he's a pastor. He says, she's talking to me about converting to Judaism, which of course she now has, you know.
Come on, Casey.
Fast forward all this time later, about a year ago,
Which great house is America? I mean, we could be, Randy Chang says, if Dune is in the universe is an analog and oil is the spice, which great house is America? Probably the Imperium. Let's be real. We use the Harkonnens, which you know, you could say is arguably Israel, to control the spice fields, but they actually don't have direct control of the spice fields. We send in our own military, which I guess is Leto Atreides, and the domestic indigenous forces of Israel and Afghanistan could be the House Atreides. And then it doesn't work out, so then we kind of backstab them, and then it all falls apart.
marries some Israeli guy and she converts to Judaism. But he goes,
I'm going to use the restroom in a moment.
you know, I'm a Christian. He's an evangelical pastor. He says, and I'm trying to talk her in off the ledge. I don't know what's gotten into her, all this. And so this was how my college career began. That's sort of what created me. And then for the next
we can blame Casey Dillon. There was this meme from Obama where Obama was talking about a leggy bisexual girl. Obama, leggy lesbian girl. Looking back, it's embarrassing to recognize the degree to which my intellectual curiosity those first 2 years of college paralleled the interests of various women I was attempting to get to know. Marx and Marcuse, so I had something to say to the long-legged socialists who lived in my dorm. Fanon and Gwendolyn Brooks for the smooth-skinned sociology major who never gave me a second look. Foucault and Wolf for the ethereal bisexual who wore mostly black. As a strategy for picking up girls, my pseudo-intellectualism proved mostly worthless. I found myself in a series of affectionate but chaste friendships. And there's this fucking meme of Obama. Obama incel meme. I don't know if it's here, but there's one where it's like, you know, the one where the black kid is getting rejected in a high school. Black kid rejected high school nerd meme. And it's Obama, but it's the nerdy guy. And it's like, why do they always pick thugs? And then it's like 28 years later. And it's like, hey, Obama, you know, remember me? Why can't I find a good man? And it's like, I'm going to drone strike the Middle East. God, I love the internet. Internet remains undefeated.
4 or 5 months, my life turned upside down where it was these people like Cassie, this guy Cabot Phillips. I think he was a campus reform. I think he might be a Daily Wire now. His father, Tim Phillips, ran this big nonprofit, Americans for Prosperity. He's friends with Morton Blackwell from Leadership Institute. This guy was coming at me. He was on me all the time on Twitter. And these people were just pushing this line. Nick Fuentes is alt-right. He's a white nationalist. He's a Jew hater.
Well, now he is, right? So why the objection?
An anti-Semite. And, you know, me at that time as an 18-year-old guy, I'm thinking I'm just asking questions, you know. I'm just doing what we're supposed to do. It's free speech. I'm America first, the rest of it. And then the first big hit piece was actually written about me.
LB says, this is happening. We're only as strong as the least corrupted. Wrong, LB. Let's think about it. If we had Kamala Harris, then we wouldn't have cut USAID. So the Lancet study says that 14 million people are going to die as a result of $10 billion worth of AIDS cuts. So there would be 14 million less dead people from dengue, malaria, and AIDS. And then also, while Israel would still occupy Gaza, we wouldn't be giving them a green light in order to conduct ethnic cleansing, and we also wouldn't be trying to do it for them by voluntarily relocating 1 million people to Libya, which was a plan that the Trump administration supported. Then we also wouldn't have killed, probably thousands of Ukrainians by withdrawing aid from them. So wrong. The lesser of two evils is still comparatively good. So wrong. And your line of thinking killed 14 million people. So I hope you feel ideologically pure.
By Media Matters. Come to find out, Media Matters sourced the material from Cassie Dillon. She sent one of my clips, and I'll admit, it wasn't the finest clip. I stand by it, but it was, the way that I said it was sort of unfortunate. But she took a clip from my show. She sent.
Connor, you're a military man. Your troops only as strong as the weakest link. That applies to countries too. Yeah, I'm a military man. Do you know what happened to the weakest link in the infantry? They got the shit kicked out of them, and they got fucking abandoned on the battlefield. Unironically, like on the battlefield, there was this one story of a guy who I know who wasn't particularly fit, and basically his squad just operated without him. They were just like, hey, try to keep up. And then they did everything they needed to do, and he tried to keep up.
To Media Matters, and they did this big hit piece about me. And then I had the left breathing down my neck, Right Wing Watch. All
right, I'll be right back. Well, actually, hold on. I'm gonna let it play. I'm gonna use the restroom. I'm gonna get some water. And when I get back, we're probably gonna fast forward 20 minutes or so, because to be honest, I don't need the villain origin story. Nick Fuentes was friendly with Cassie Dillon. Cassie Dillon was sympathetic to the Jews. Nick Fuentes was not. Cassie Dillon could have jumped on the grenade and kissed Nick Fuentes and made him her boyfriend, but he was too socially awkward to do so. As a result, Nick was, there's got to be something to this Jewish criticism, so I'm a quintuple down on it. The Jews are trying to get me fired from my job. So as a result, now he's a supervillain. Got it. Okay. Understood. Cassie Dillon could have saved us, but she didn't.
Media Matters, all the rest of them. And this was kind of like the launch of my career. They were trying to throttle me in the crib.
How do you know that Cassie sent the clip to Media Matters?
This was told to me by Joe Seals.
Okay, got it. So she was sending around clips from your show.
Right. And that's their move. That's what they do. As you know, and the show wasn't even big. I had like 100 live viewers. I would get 1,000 views per episode. But they were on top of this. And even Ben Shapiro, he quote tweeted one of my tweets and said, because I said something to the effect of, if you're a Mexico first, live in Mexico. If you're China first, live in China. If you're Israel first, live in Israel. And he quote tweets me on Christmas Eve and says, well, that's the surest sign you're an anti-Semite, is to accuse a Jew of dual loyalty. And I'm sitting there like, it's true. You do have dual loyalty. You're going to sit there and say you don't? So this was like it's maddening. It's literally will drive you crazy, because by definition, it's gaslighting, because you see it. If you're a logical person, it's obvious. And, this is something that maybe is helpful to explain my mindset. I'm waiting for someone to prove me wrong. I'm pushing on all these narratives, the foreign aid, the Iraq war, all of it. And I'm waiting for someone to tell me, here's all the evidence, the obvious evidence that it isn't all just a big thing. Mm-hmm. It's not just a big conspiracy. And I'm asking in good faith, where is that evidence? Cassie, my friend, and all the rest of them. And instead of getting an answer, I'm getting blocked. I'm getting tattled on. I'm getting clipped out of context. They're selling me out to the left. I'm getting called names. And, from the very start, this made me extremely cynical and resentful and furious about the whole thing. And I said,
maybe we need to continue, because if we're moving from here are my unaddressed criticisms and how I operated in the political space, then I'm actually happy to hear that point.
I'm like at war now with the whole conservative establishment, and the same opportunities for advancement that other people are getting. They get their spot on Fox News, or they get to run a Turning Point chapter, you name it. I'm now being closed off because there's this smear campaign now going on behind the scenes of.
Wait, but is it smears if it's true? If it's like, hey, Nick is an anti-Zionist and he's antipathetic. He's antipathetic against Jews. Are the smears, or are they descriptive? You can say that they're unbalanced. You can say that they're not particularly well thought out. Why is it that the United States declares open allegiance for Israel so fervently? But I would cite to you the previous iterations that I've done, which is effectively Germany tries to wipe out Jewry and expel it from Europe. Europeans and Americans don't accept Jewish refugees. Ultimately, the Germans wipe out a third of the international Jewish population. In the early 20th century, Americans and Europeans feel kind of guilty about the fact that they let a third of international Jews be wiped out. And so at first, they're neutral on the establishment of the state of Israel. And then later, they become positive on the state of Israel. The Christian nationalist narrative that Jews are a vestigial religion and therefore don't need to exist is co-opted into the narrative of Judeo-Christian values, which, by the way, I think is a viable historical interpretation. So instead of Jews being a vestigial arm that can be destroyed and Christians shouldn't give a shit, it's instead rewritten like Jews are the way that we've emanated from them with our values. Therefore, they're important people that we should protect and care for. And then that continues into the modern day with that post-World War II narrative. And then effectively, Nick is trying to revert to 19th century and early 20th century, what I would view as anti-Semitism. So what's the problem with that narrative? That there's two competing views, the Zionist narrative and the anti-Zionist narrative, and Nick is an anti-Zionist. Now, I understand that that gets conflated with anti-Semitism, which is just a general antipathy towards Jewish people in general. And Nick might say, like, there's token Jews that he can interact with. However, what's the problem? What part are you not understanding? Gonna check in with chat because I parasocially love you. This is happening says, and how many did your reluctance and the culture you contribute to convince to stay home? Yeah. So I think that Kamala and the Biden admin can be substantively blamed for their failure in 2024. However, I do think that the progressives and leftists who were like, yeah, well, Biden's a genocider and Kamala's no better, so who cares? I'm sure. There were there were around actually, I don't think it was 10 million. I think there was 5 million, because I think the 2020 votes was around 82 million per side for the population vote. And I think the ultimate body count around the 2024 election was around 75. There were 5 million people who did not show up to the ballots. So, yeah, I would blame the far left for contributing to that. Cornelius Cadre says, huge hand, strong mustache, far right, competitive, confrontational, high T confirmed, Cope Bucko. Who are you talking about? You talking about Stalin? What are you talking about? You talking about the Austrian painter? What are you talking about? Boris says, I'll say it again. The U.S., despite all the sympathy for Jews after World War II, only started sending military aid after the 1967 war when they proved themselves to be a formidable force in the Middle East. Yep. There was 20 years of antipathetic neutrality in Israel's early government. Connor says, how much Zionism controls the U.S. government? Well, they probably only give a shit about the United States government insofar as it continues to support Israel. So I would say that if that's $3.8 billion per year, then they control about 0.16%, whatever. All right. Anyways.
Powerful, connected people at Daily Wire, a whisper campaign telling everybody this guy's an anti-Semite. And this went on really for many years, goes on until this day. But that was sort of my origin story. That's how I got started.
Okay, so you were 18 years old when that happened. How old are you now?
I'm 26.
Okay, so that was a long time ago.
Yes.
And since then, would you say that going through that period?
AKA Batasui, I don't know if this is sarcastic, but he says, I bet the Dems would have had a better shot if they apologized for 2 years of the COVID crap, COVID and or the BLM crap. And by the way, they should apologize to both sides. They should apologize to normies and they should apologize to the progressives. They should apologize to the normies because they let the rioting go on all summer. they should apologize to the progressives because all of the political momentum that they had in order to pass law enforcement reform, they didn't do a fucking thing with that political momentum. Actually embarrassing.
Period of being rejected when you were literally just asking questions from people who were your friends and then kind of sold down
Justin says 1.5 speed it. Listen, bro, I appreciate you donating, but not everybody has ADHD. No.
the river. Did that then make you go, okay, no, actually, I do hate Jews because of what you're doing to me? I'm now responding, and my response is, I hate you all.
No, I never said I hated all Jews, and I've always had Jewish friends. You know, Laura Loomer actually used to be a friend of mine back in 2018. We did a show together in June 2018. I had a Jewish assistant at one point in 2019 after the Groyper War. I'm a Catholic. I've always been a Catholic. I'm a cradle Catholic. So I've never hated anybody. You know, I do have some provocative statements and some controversial views, but I never
like they want to make us die in a holy war. We will make them die in a holy war. Referring to Jews. LB says, what is this crap about BLM? 99% of BLM was peaceful. That's white supremacist propaganda that BLM was violent. Oh, okay. You just want to... Do we just want to pull up like a BLM? Let's just see how many people died in the BLM BLM riots deaths. 25 people died during the unrest. How many billions of dollars of damage? BLM riot dollar estimate of damage. $1 billion. Billion with a B. Nope. I don't accept it. You mean the ones Kyle Rittenhouse murdered? He didn't murder LB. I swear to God. I swear to God, LB, I'm starting to think that you're a groyper pretending to be a progressive black woman just to trigger the fuck out of me.
said they're attacking me. Now I hate them all. I never took it that far. But what it did do is it demonstrated that, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, if you're pushing on something and you get that hard of a pushback, I'm thinking, I'm not a big deal. I'm an 18-year-old kid. I don't have a big show. What do people care what I have to say? If I'm pushing on this and I'm getting forceful response from these institutions, campus reform, Daily Wire, the rest of it, I'm thinking something must be up. So what I did is I just kept pursuing that line of inquiry and saying, well, you know, if this is what they don't want us to talk about, this is what we should be talking about. Obviously, there's something they're hiding there. And this led what I would describe it as is like an 8-year inquiry. You know, I've been digging into this subject for 8 years, and it's sort of a difficult subject because since it is so taboo and since it is so censored, there's like this layered deception where the first layer is they make it so that you don't even want to think about it. No one wants to be thinking about the Jews, you know, or Israel. And certainly nobody wants to be on the wrong side of that. No one wants to be called an anti-Semite or a Nazi or a Hitler. That's sort of layer one. But layer two, because there's so much censorship, you don't even know where to get the information. If somebody wants to know more about this topic, try Googling it. All the search results are curated. If you go on Wikipedia, the sources are curated. So where do you go next? Well, you have to go to the kooks and the cranks and people that have been canceled. Some of them have been canceled because there are hateful people in this world that do hate Jews. There are people out there that are schizophrenic, but they're lumped in, censored, and called names and banished from society, just like the real scholars, just like people like Ron Unz, just like people like Michael Collins Piper, you know, people that have investigated this. And
Gray Jedi says, I would like to see a BLM episode. Sure, we can do it.
Are intelligent, logical people. And so once you sort of descend into the second layer, you know, the second ring of hell of being an anti-Semite, then you have to parse out the information and discern what's real, what's fake. You know, is it a religious thing? Is it a racial thing? Is it an Israel thing, a nation state thing? And then there's subtleties even beyond that, you know, things I've been getting into on my show for the past few years. The deception is so much more convoluted and nuanced and subtle and ubiquitous than even people think. You know, a lot of people think, and, you know, not to kind of leap right into the topic, but people have a vague notion Israel has too much influence over our government. That's really just the tip of the iceberg. Because then you get into some of these people that have coalesced around Trump in the past couple of years after October 7th. And it's like there's an obvious reason why there's elements in the right.
Bago Breedy says, hello, Cotter. Just got here. Did you see the food shops video shitting on you? No. I don't want to be too mean, but effectively what happened was food shops was like normalizing lolicon or, you know, pedo cartoon shit in the commentary space. I criticized Chud Logic and her. And then there was a couple of weeks there where she was like, oh, well, if you're going to criticize me, then you should have me on the show so you can criticize me to your face. And then I was running the show with Brianna Wu at the time. And Brianna was like, I don't want to be anywhere near this shit. So Brianna kind of put a kibosh on it. And I was like, you know what? I don't really want to do it either. And so she can be upset. She can be pissed. I was pretty, I don't know, cordial in DMs considering the circumstance. But, you know, I'm not going to pretend that looking at immediately post-pubescent teenagers and using that for pornographic inspiration, I'm not going to pretend that's normal. So she can be pissed if she wants to be. Not my problem. Not my problem. But if you feel, if there was anything substantive, feel free to communicate a substantive criticism. Yeah.
There's almost this form of camouflage they'll do. And one day they're limited government, another day they're white nationalists. You know, guys like Stephen Miller, who will present as very racialist and very nationalistic, very conservative, but yet still extremely loyal to Israel. And you start to say it's not just that Israel influences the government. It's not just there's some vague thing going on. There is this pervasive penetration of our society by a fifth column. And it's so sophisticated and multidimensional and spans many disciplines. It's such a huge topic that you almost have to be a little bit insane to tackle it and to get to the bottom of it, which is sort of.
What's the bottom of it, though, Nick? Because effectively, like, even if you could say this as a critique of Israel's and Jews, or you could say this in support of Israel's and Jews. What, like, I already said it, so I barely want to say it again. The post-World War II narrative that the Jewish diaspora went to two places from Europe. They went to Israel, they went to the United States. There's Jews in the United States who support Israel. They petition their government in order to support Israel. They've rewritten Christian anti-Semitism to no longer be anti-Semitic. And then the guilt associated with the horrors of World War II and the Holocaust is kind of wearing off as the generations go on. And so people are calling out the state of Israel. So what is the, I don't know, what's the alternative narrative? What's the deeper conspiracy? What's the thing that goes beyond that? Right? Because, I mean, for me, that's like a perfectly, if you're a pro-Jew, you can say, okay, well, in spite of this being an intentional effort, I actually do sympathize with the state of Israel, and I do sympathize with the Jewish people. Or you can say, I think this is too Machiavellian. I don't support Jewish people in general, and I don't support the Israeli state. So, you know, like what's the extra layer of craziness, right? Like, even if Jeffrey Epstein ends up being a Mossad agent, that could be part of my calculus, where if he's working for CIA and for Mossad in order to leverage blackmail against government forces, of course I'm going to say that's like nefarious and fucked up and whatever. But I've kind of had the presumption, because I'm aware of the history of the CIA, that this is what intel agencies do. So again, I'm kind of bemused at the deeper level. Whatever says there's a vein of anti-whiteness in parts of liberal Jewish community. This is a truth. Sure. And I think we should criticize the fuck out of those people the same way that there's a vein of not just anti-Israeli sentiment. There's a vein of anti-Jewish sentiment where you're not criticizing the state of Israel or its political stuff. You're saying that this is inherent to Judaism. So yeah, there's anti-white behaviors in the Jewish community that I don't like, and there's anti-Jewish white behaviors that I don't like in the white community. If you buy into race as a social construct, which I do. Brandon Zero says, Connor, has Nick actually ever done Holocaust denialism? Yes, because I have seen his anti-Semitism, but it always is an ironic humor that leaves me to believe that he is just like an edgy, maybe. But I think that he's basically come out and said that he thinks the Holocaust is exaggerated. So, yeah. Puzzle-headed Cook says, making AIPAC register as a foreign agent is a start and ban dual citizens from serving in government. I don't know the laws around that, and I don't know if there's enough motivation at the democratic level, meaning like the population. I don't know if the population cares enough to do that. I mean, if you can, I don't think, in principle, I don't care. I think that you should swear allegiance to the United States of America, and you should effectively not be a dual citizen if you serve in government. I agree with that. I don't know if you have enough political momentum to do it. Justin says Nick is anti-Jewish, not an anti-Semite. I don't know what the difference between those two would be. Connor, they discuss race and IQ later in the video. That's where I want to hear your opinion. Based. I'm excited. All right, let's continue. Well, hold on. Whatever says this before we get back into it. The problem with saying race is a social construct is once it becomes from the same people who now tell you sex is a social construct and it prevents ethnic countries preserving themselves. Okay. Anyways.
Me going through the looking glass over the past 8 years. So
Right. So I want to tell you where I agree with you and where I don't agree with you. But first, I just want to ask you, going back to your high school years, because obviously you were very dialed in. You cared about politics. I think you mentioned that you were involved with.
If they, I'm a fast forward 5 because I don't want to talk about high school. I don't care about high school.
he's visibly Jewish.
Okay, but just so we're very clear,
No, I know.
I genuinely had no idea. Your PR person comes, here are the shows. Okay, yes. Dave Smith, we had amazing conversation when I was on the Daily Wire.
Mhm.
And so your purview here is, okay, well, they're Jewish and she's doing their shows while not saying to your audience she's doing a bunch of other shows too. How is that not you just kind of honing in before we get to the why you think I'm
Sure.
full of shit
Yeah.
and don't know what I'm doing?
Well, here's the beef, okay? And it's pretty simple.
Ooh, sorry, I got to rewind it 2
Dave-
minutes.
Talk about a and why he would be mad about, but she is.
And it gets derailed.
Right.
Where I'm going to push back on you is to say that you didn't have this anger where you applied it to everyone, because one of the, and I don't have this clip, but
One is theological, the other is racial, Valor Media Network. That's how I know you don't know much on religion. What the fuck are you talking about, man? Judaism is, so number one, Judaism itself, the philosophy is a religion. Now, Jewish people consider themselves, quote unquote, the Jewish people. But what's interesting about that is that they have multi-ethno-religious backgrounds because of the Jewish diaspora. I don't think there's a single thing that you could say about race or ethno-religious stuff that I haven't considered. So, you know, go ahead and feel free to expand on how I don't know about ethno-religious issues or race.
I know that recently, and this was after I was fired from the Daily Wire, you kind of went on the attack about me speaking to Dave Smith, right? And saying,
Oh my God, Justin says Talmudic Judaism is younger than Christianity. This is like me saying Hadithic Islam. All right. Listen. A black woman is talking. I'm going to sit my white ass down and listen. Okay. The Talmudic Judaism, like there's no Jew who's read the entire Talmud. There's parts of the Talmud that are so fucking boring that nobody's read those parts of the Talmud in hundreds, if not thousands of years. The Talmud also predates Jesus. Yeah. The Talmud was written like as far back as the Persian Empire. There's Talmudic references when they were in Babylonian exile. So again, I think you don't know, Justin, but I'll let Nick explain it and then I'll try to contend with whatever he says.
actually, I think we do have that clip. Skylar, I think we do have that clip. of me speaking to Dave Smith. Do you want to run that clip?
She has nothing to do with me. She wants nothing to do with me. Doesn't do anything with me. No invitation. Won't bring me on the space. Won't bring me on the show. No acknowledgement. Nothing. But she is going to do a show with Dave Smith, Jew, Aiden Ross. You know, and I like Aiden Ross. I've said that before. I like Aiden Ross. But it's like you get canceled and attacked by Jews, and then you go and give it away to all the Jews, really? And finally, Aiden asks her, so what are your thoughts on Nick Fuentes? And she gives this load of PC response.
So the Babylonian Talmud, which was written in Babylonian Aramaic, came out in 70 CE. So that's almost contemporary to Christ. And then not just that, you understand that like most societies relayed their history through oral tradition. Like the Old Testament of the Bible goes back to probably 10,000 years before Christ. And the story of Moses is 1200 before Christ. So if it got written down at the time or around the time or immediately after Jesus was born, that has nothing to do with how old the stories are. The Babylonian Talmud, because I remember reading an abbreviated version of the Talmud, has entries from people who were in the Babylonian exile. Yeah, okay, Connor, just watch, dude. Okay, I will.
She goes, well, you know, when he was a kid, he got attacked by them. And I understand why he would be angry and why he would be mad about that. But he needs to grow up and figure out what he wants to do. Oh, really? Oh, really? Bafangul, Candace. Oh, he needs to figure out what he wants to do. I think you need to figure that out. Talk about accusing other people of that which...
Wrong. Talmud talks about Jesus. You guys are fucking dumb as shit. You're going to fucking piss me off. Justin has the pass because he fucking donates. And also he typically has a pretty polite way of communicating disagreement. Cornelius, wrong. The Talmud talks about Jesus. You fucking idiot. The Bible talks about Jesus. Are there parts of the Bible that predate Jesus? Obviously. You're fucking wrong. Shut the fuck up. You have an 80 IQ at best. You walk in here, you act like you know what the fuck you're talking about. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I know more than you. I've read more history than you. I've read more religious texts than you. So if Nick, who is smart, is gonna make me make an argument that I can deal with, that's fine. But at Cornelius, you 60 IQ fucking numbskull fucking guppy fish, wrong. Talmud talks about Jesus. The Bible talks about Jesus. Are you saying the Bible was exclusively written after his death? Obviously not. You fucking tool. Don't tell me my business. I know more than you.
You are guilty. I think he needs to figure out what he wants to do. I think you need to figure out what you want to do because you're full of and everyone knows it. You clearly.
Conservative liberalism, articulating my point, says Jews believe the oral tradition of the Talmud starts with fucking Moses, which is 1200 before Christ. That was my point.
Have no idea what you're doing.
No idea what I am doing.
True.
What do you mean true?
You didn't invite me on the show.
But what does that, just let's first go back to the first layer of what you're talking about. She's speaking of Dave Smith. Yeah. What does that have to do with anything? You call out the fact that I spoke to Dave Smith, that I spoke to Aiden Ross. I didn't speak to them because they were Jewish. I also talked to Piers Morgan, all of these shows following me being fired. So you're just looking at the fact that these two, I didn't even know Aiden Ross was Jewish. I just had a PR agent say, do this. I swear I didn't know.
He's visibly Jewish.
Okay, but just so we're very clear,
No, I know.
I genuinely had no idea. Your PR person comes, here are the shows. Okay, yes. Dave Smith, we had amazing conversation when I was on the Daily Wire. And so your purview here is, okay, well, they're Jewish and she's doing their...
No, I'm not. Oh my God, you fucking idiots. I actually have to explain this. AKA Badasui. I know you. I love you. You're triggering a fucking rant. The Talmud is a series of rabbinical arguments going back and forth. Talmud. The Talmud includes the teachings and opinions of thousands of rabbis on a variety of subjects, including halakha, Jewish ethics, philosophy, customs, history. Okay? The way that the Talmud works is that it's a series of arguments. So basically, a rabbi, somebody who studies Judaism, and somebody who is a religious mentor within the community, it is expected throughout his life that he will make arguments related to religion, ethics, philosophy, etc. So what old school said and what I said is that even if the Jerusalem Talmud and the Babylonian Talmud, I think they said that they estimated that this was written around 70 CE, so after Jesus was born. And then also, I don't know when the Jerusalem Talmud was written. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. When was the Jerusalem Talmud written? 400 CE. When was the Babylonian Talmud written? They're saying it was written down within the 3rd and 6th centuries, but there was another thing that I Googled where basically it began in 70 CE. Okay? But the point of this is that the Talmud is a series of arguments between rabbis in reference to the Jewish faith, and a lot of this tradition was kept orally. So, 1200, where Moses started before Christ, is arguably when rabbis started arguing about Jewish ethics, philosophy, religious belief, etc. So the fact that it was written in 70 CE or began to be written in 70 CE and then was starting to be written down more codified around 200 CE doesn't mean dick, because it's a bunch of random rabbis arguing about random shit. Even most rabbis haven't read the entire Talmud, and not just that, but the Talmud itself is, there are better and worse parts. The same way, this is like me saying that, have you read this part of a Catholic priest arguing against another Catholic priest separated by centuries? So one Catholic priest in, I don't know, 500 after Christ writes a thesis about religion. And in 800 after Christ, another Catholic priest writes a response. And you're somehow saying that all of this is codified and the same, and that people understand it and know it, and they use it in order to forward a specific agenda. That doesn't make fucking sense. So if you're talking about Talmudic Judaism, I'm going to reject it flat out because I think that the fucking words don't make sense. However, if you say, oh, actually, there's this group that calls themselves Talmudic Jews, and it's a small sect of these people who have excised these lines of argument from the Talmud, and therefore they're a more hardcore aspect of Judaism, I'll believe that. But referring to old Jews as Talmudic Jews is obviously inaccurate. And then also, if you just refer to Jews as haphazardly choosing and picking references and lines of argumentation from the Talmud, that's stupid as shit. That's the same thing that people argue about with hadiths in reference to the Quran. So no, I probably know more than the groypers in my fucking chat. I'm not referring to the Old Testament. I'm referring to the Talmud.
Their shows, while not saying to your audience she's doing a bunch of other shows too. How is that not you just kind of honing in before we get to the why you think I'm
Sure.
full of shit and don't know what I'm doing?
Well, here's the beef, okay? And it's pretty simple. Dave Smith, in my opinion, and I like Dave because I've done a show with Dave too, and I think he's a good guy. I respect him. I think he's super intelligent. And, you know, he gave me a chance when a lot of people wouldn't. He had me on his show and he defended me because he got attacked a lot from the
And
libertarians.
that's why you suck, because you get somebody who comes out and defends you and has you on the show when you're being canceled, and then you throw him under the bus for, because like, I don't even know what your beef is. It's like, why not just have be totally like, oh yeah, that was cool. We had a conversation. I disagree with him on some points.
Well, here's why. Because I don't think that I should be grateful for being given a chance.
It's not being grateful. It's just being a decent enough human being. Forget.
Correct. Like, actually, Candace is telling Nick that he should play the clout game better, and Nick is saying, no, fuck you, because he's bitter.
Gratefulness.
Okay.
You don't owe anybody anything.
Okay.
But the point is you kind of.
Jesus is talked about in the Talmud because obviously there's Talmudic arguments after Christ came, and they basically say there's one spicy rabbi who says that because Jesus has led the people astray and led them into worshiping idols, he's actually a fucking asshole, and he's burning in hell in a giant, pit of shit, of burning shit. Jesus is in a giant burning pile of shit Talmud. They replied with boiling and hot excrement. The Talmud decrees that Jesus is in hell being boiled in feces because he opposed the rabbis. No, that's not what it says. God, this is so fucking frustrating. There's one spicy rabbi. It's basically the destiny of rabbis. Okay?
Kind of lament the fact that you've been canceled. You lament the fact when nobody will have your platform. And in the very same breath, talk about being a hypocrite, you're going after Dave Smith for what? Like, why is she doing Dave Smith? Jew.
Well,
no, I never said that Jesus is in the Talmud. I'm saying that the Talmud predates Jesus. You fucking idiots.
Tell you. Can I explain why? I'm telling you why.
You can.
So my feeling on Dave Smith, and although I like him, is that, look, he is Jewish. He's also a libertarian, which means that.
Justin, don't be paternalistic. I fucking know more than you. I'm probably double your age.
You know, when he talks about, for example, the situation in Iran or Israel, he's an anti-war guy. He says, you know, Trump is a war criminal who needs to be impeached. I don't believe in any of that. I don't care that Trump violated international law. I care that he's influenced by a foreign government. He said on another show, he said, Israel's a satellite of the U.S. We're the empire, and they're our satellite. They're like our aircraft carrier in the Middle East, which is something Joe Biden said, who's an AIPAC man. I think that Dave Smith is somebody who, because he's a paleo-libertarian, like Murray Rothbard, like Ron Paul, like a lot of these guys, he is someone who, because he's anti-war, is sort of forced to confront the Israel lobby. Because if you're anti-war, ideologically.
Justin. The Talmud is an argumentative oral history that predates Christ. That is still accurate. That is an accurate statement.
You have to talk about who's driving it, which is the Israel lobby. But he's not a religious Christian. He's a religious Jew or agnostic or atheist.
But Simo says, where do we land our planes in Israel? What's the name of a U.S. base? Number one, I don't know if we have a fucking base there, but we already talked about how we use them for the military-industrial complex development and how they help with the intel. We already talked about that.
He's not really a right-wing guy. He's a libertarian. He's
not a religious Jew.
He says that he's proud of being Jewish. He's proud of his ethnicity. He's proud of Judaism.
Should he not be proud that he's he's just born this way?
Well, but here's the point, though, is so he's not really 100% aligned with my view. Now, here's why that matters. I think that
it doesn't.
No, it does.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. I'll tell you why.
It doesn't. You can't say I want to create people in the image of myself.
No, I'm
completely ridiculous.
I'm criticizing people that I disagree with. And to put it very succinctly, I think that this conversation about Israel has blown up. It's gotten out of their control. Everyone's getting red-pilled. They want to control the conversation. And I think that Dave Smith is somebody that, because he's Jewish, because he's libertarian, they have selected him as a convenient spokesperson for it, because he doesn't really have a problem with Jews and their Jewishness. He doesn't really talk about the whole fifth column aspect of it. He talks about a very narrow aspect of it, which is there's this Israel lobby and they're sort of influential and they're driving us to war. that's one small
So
selection
you
of it.
think, just to clarify, you think he's like a psychological operation?
Yeah, effectively, yes.
Okay.
And I don't think he's doing that knowingly, but I think that they're creating the bounds of the debate by having him be the spokesperson because
Who is choosing him as a spokes? I mean,
Joe Rogan,
I
Piers
could not
Morgan.
disagree with that more. I just want to say that I patently disagree with you on this one. This is crazy. I think that he has moved the ball forward so much for, first and foremost, a lot of American Jews to have the courage to even question Israel, because in the same way that we were kind of brought up in the classroom with the, I guess you want to call it, emotional engineering around the Holocaust, learning about the Holocaust as like the biggest, most evil event that ever happened. Imagine if you're Jewish and you learn about that. It's the same way that Black Americans in the classrooms learn about.
Whatever says weird, I keep getting blocked. Well, I don't know what you're writing, but I don't do the block feature. You're getting auto blocked.
Learn about slavery. So I understood the trigger emotional response that Black Americans had during BLM, because there was so much conditioning that happened in the classroom that makes them think that when someone says white supremacy is back, you have to riot. And I will extend that same understanding. I disagree with it, but I understand that when October 7th happens, it's almost like a childhood trauma for these people.
Right.
You learn this, your whole existence, it's existential crisis for you that something happened in Israel. And then you add in the fact that the ADL is sponsoring these trips to kind of make sure that they stay into this, this is who you are. And if somebody questions this, like we could end up in the Holocaust again. You have to have some sort of an understanding, even if it's they're wrong,
Right.
you have to give them a little bit of time, a little bit of grace here. And so
I love that Candace is the rational anti-Semite in this conversation, where she's like, listen, the Jews are just traumatized, man. They're just traumatized. So, you have to give them grace. Thank you, Candace. Thank you.
for him to be doing what he's doing and to be enduring a lot of the same stuff that I'm enduring, like he is on lists, he is being attacked by every single people, all people that are attacking me are certainly attacking Dave Smith. And your excuse is that he just is born Ashkenazi.
No, that's not my excuse. My problem.
I'm going to lift again.
Married to a Catholic, by the way. So that that's the part that I'm even more confused about, because you said like he's a religious Jew. No, he's not. He's married to a Catholic.
What I mean by that is my criticism of Jews comes from a religious place. As a Catholic, we recognize that the Pharisees put Jesus on the cross, and the Talmudic Jews are the descendants of the Pharisees. And we also recognize
and he is not a Talmudist. That's what I want to say.
But that's
he's
what I'm
not
saying.
any of those things. He's married to a Catholic. He's just born Ashkenazi.
But
so when I hear you say Dave Smith, Jew, I think it conflicts with your point about how even white people, like you're just kind of trained that you should just like, there's something wrong with you for being born white. No one should feel guilty about how they're born.
Look, it's
like, you know what I mean?
To sum it up succinctly, it's tokenism is what it is. It's a form of saying, we're criticizing the Jews in Israel. How do we soften and dampen the blow? Because we're going to get called anti-Semites if we bring on a guy criticizing Israel. I know we'll bring on a Jewish person, because then we get to say, I'm not an anti-Semite. Here's a Jewish person saying this. And here's the reason.
That's not why I had Dave Smith on. Actually, I had him on my podcast before I even left the Daily Wire. We had a 3-hour conversation about talking about war. And truly, because I think it's important for you to hear this, I think sometimes you internet too hard.
Agreed. What's funny is watching Candace be the adult in the room in reference to this. Never assign to malice what can be assigned to incompetence or stupidity. And when it comes to Hassan Piker, I overwhelmingly assign to stupidity more than I assign to malice. Cameron Mosley, Connor, why are we doing this? Because suffering for your entertainment is my job. And so far, I have been paid to do that job, and I am going to continue to get paid to do this job. And I'm a masochist.
The way that Dave Smith came onto our podcast on Daily Wire, he wasn't even on my radar. Skylar, who you just met, the producer, was a massive Dave Smith fan for years, and just kind of like what the libertarian
that explains a lot
debate was that was being had. He's like, you got to check out this guy, Dave Smith. And I was like, cool, book him. Let's get him on the show. And it was my favorite podcast that I did at Daily Wire. So I just liked him.
Okay.
That's it. There was no incentive of like, well, let me get this guy on again. I was like, can we create the magic of what we spoke about war? Because I'm kind of falling, I guess, down the rabbit hole and learning a lot. And he had a lot of information I didn't know.
Yeah.
And that was it. So there was no there was nothing behind it. So when I hear you say it, I'm like, okay, are you interneting too hard? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A little bit. Do you think that you can kind of believe your own ideas? And look, we're all guilty of that.
No,
But
and look, I mean, I'm going to stand by my point here, which is that me and Dave Smith are not ideologically on the same page, and will never be, because I am a Catholic and he is Jewish. Because he is Jewish, he still has affinity with Jewish people. And so my end game is to say, look, Thomas Aquinas said that Jewish people should be basically enserfed to the Catholic Church. I don't believe that. But the idea that we have Jewish people in America that are billionaires, that are running all the major media conglomerates, that are influencing the government, and they take advantage of the dual citizenship, it literally cannot be allowed. Like by definition, systematically or systemically, this creates problems. And so,
see, and this is where I have to know the policy solution. I have to know the policy solution, right? Because this is antithetical to the Republic of the United States of America. Okay, so if we look at the First Amendment of the United States, Congress shall make no laws respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This was actually our First Amendment. And then we've since had the Supremacy Clause saying that you cannot discriminate based off of religion, even at the state level. And so the argument is effectively like, we are in a wholly religious struggle where we must dispossess Jews of their power and influence and clout. And by its very nature, it would have to be extra legal. So these people are not Republican. They vote in the Republican Party because MAGA allows them to be a vehicle through which to achieve their political goals. But this is extra constitutional in and of itself definitionally. So I have no problems effectively saying that these people are my enemies. They are my political enemies. We are on opposite sides of a political issue. Cornelia says, Mosley, we must dissect the irrational hate of the groypers as the fastest growing group within young conservatives. Are you going to react to more movies? Yeah, of course. Matter of fact, Tyler Pham, I already have 6 weeks of science fiction and Star Wars breakdown content already shot, and the editor is working on it. We're just waiting for the green light from the business guy so we can get an LLC and so we can disperse the funds. So literally, as soon as he does that, we're going to have weekly content for 6 weeks. And of course, I'm going to keep shooting content as we go. Yeah. And then Cornelius, I think you're making the same mistake as Hassan Piker. Hassan Piker thought that because his movement grew by 5% or 10%, that he was gaining political relevancy. But what he doesn't recognize is that the rest of the political world abhors him. So he's not going to be politically viable. This is the Connor I like seeing thinking hard. Thanks. Extra legal W. See, yeah, Cornelius is just like, yeah, fuck the Constitution. Well, no, and bump you, right? My mother is saying that I'm saying the F word too much, so I'll try to use other words to insult you. Trump is deporting legal citizens if they criticize Israel. No, he's not. The only person that got detained for deportation was Mahmoud Khalil, who wasn't a citizen. He was a green card holder, and he was released recently. So I think you're just making stuff up. Whatever says Connor do Forbidden Planet for the Sci-Fi Channel, maybe. All right. Crypto Pleb says groypers will win. Watch. Doubt.
when I go on my show, I'm saying we can't have Jewish people in government. Like, we can't have them having billions of dollars.
Okay, yeah, literally talking about extra constitutional, extra legal political movement.
This is a problem. It's like a national security problem because they are a fifth column. And as evidenced by recent developments, they're not loyal to America. Now,
I agree with you. And that's why I want to add this. I agree with you on the point that there is this operating fifth column of Zionism.
No.
Okay? No, but I want to be clear. And I'll tell you, this is where we disagree.
All right.
Because I think it's ridiculous to say to someone who's literally just born, he's like, I'm Ashkenazi, that is just his DNA, who is married to a Catholic, so you cannot call him a religious Jew, He is not a Zionist. He hasn't even been to Israel. So how do you just condemn him? And then also, how is that not toxic to what you're trying to do? So if you're saying that your entire platform is, I want to.
LB says, that's a lie, Connor. There's an American citizen Marine in detention right now. Yeah. Is he deported? And was he detained specifically because he criticized the state of Israel?
Awaken people to this fifth column. Well, if I'm a Jewish person, okay, and I'm being raised and maybe I'm worried about Israel because I kind of grew up and was told that I have to care about this because of the Holocaust, whatever it is. And I see this guy who's just going, Jew, guilty, you're Jew, doesn't matter, DNA, like you're 23andMe up there, Jew, guilty, okay? And
which Nick has done jokingly in the past.
And you think that your ideas are going to grow with that perspective?
Well, they are. So that's happening. But
is that because of thanks to you or thanks to Dave? I
think it's thanks to me. But if you're asking me, I will answer. If you're lecturing me, I'll take the lecture.
I genuinely I'm asking you the question sincerely. You think it's growing because of you and not because of people like Dave who are going, okay, like, yeah, you can also think like this. It's okay to have this perspective. Like you think it's because they're watching your show and they're going, he's got it right.
Let me give you a direct answer about the first part about Dave Smith. Just because he's born Jewish. What did he say when he went on Joe Rogan and he debated, what's the guy's name? He debated the British guy, forget
Douglas Murray.
Douglas Murray. When he debated Douglas Murray said, and you hear this is the woke right phenomenon, which Dave has criticized, but Douglas said, there is this dark element that is growing on the right. They're Holocaust deniers. They hate Jews. If they slip on a banana peel, they blame a Jew and all the rest of it. Dave Smith said, I agree with you. Those people are a problem. I'm against Holocaust denial and all this sort of stuff. Joe Rogan went on the attack against Jake Shields, who's a friend of mine and a fighter and a boxer.
And Jake Shields tweets about the Jews and Holocaust denial all the time. What's the point here?
And you see this over and over and over again with people like Dave Smith and even someone like Daryl Cooper, who's not Jewish. And
LB says, that's not the point. People's due process is being violated. Posse Comitatus Act is being violated. LB, no one here, including Cornelius and whatever, and Justin, no one here is talking about Posse Comitatus, and no one here is talking about due process being violated. No one's talking about that. You literally just made up something to type in all caps.
You know, I talked to Daryl recently and we kind of made amends, but Daryl Cooper put out an article on a Substack saying the same thing. He said, I started talking about the Jews. I opened up this can of worms. Now that's all people want to hear about. He said, so I'm done talking about it because, there's people that can't handle it and they're taking it too far. And when I hear that from Daryl Cooper, when I hear that from Dave Smith, when they say Israel's our satellite, our aircraft carrier, I say something's not right here. There's clearly a subtle difference here. And that has a lot to do.
Okay, there you go. LB says, I'm talking about it. And Cornelius says, so true. Connor, extra legal, get him out. Now, LB, I'm listening to Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens argue about politics. So you can argue with Cornelius about violations of due process. Go ahead.
With, maybe Daryl Cooper not being a complete radical. And I think that has a lot to do with Dave Smith being Jewish because he says that his ancestors died in the Holocaust. Now, I don't think that he'll ever be able to say in the way that I can, that maybe the Holocaust wasn't legitimate or, maybe there's more to the story on World War II because it's his grandparents.
Okay, but.
I love, God, I wish Nick would just respond to DMs, bro. Dude, Justin, Cornelius, is Nick live? Is Nick live on Rumble? Is that his primary platform, or is he still primarily on Cozy TV? Where do people super chat him? Do they super chat him on Cozy? Oh, this isn't it. Do they super chat him on Cozy TV or do they super chat him on whatever? Because I'll super chat him. Rumble. Okay. Okay.
He says my ancestors went up the smokestacks at Auschwitz. And someone like me, I say, I don't care about Auschwitz. I don't care about the Holocaust. I'm done hearing about it. I have no affinity with that.
Right. But you also mentioned Daryl Cooper and you also mentioned Joe Rogan. These two people are not Jewish, right?
Right.
So are you saying that they're all condemned? Like, why does it matter? If Dave Smith, maybe he believes that, maybe he's wrong, maybe he believes it, who knows? If Joe Rogan says that, maybe he's wrong, maybe he believes it. Let's say we don't know. Daryl Cooper, what is the difference between these three individuals? Like, why is one represent a problem for you versus like your idea? Going back to what you said, right? Let's tackle the idea. Let's actually debate the idea. So do you not see how you run into conflict with yourself? You're like, well, here's my story. I just wanted to debate the idea. And then when it comes to Dave Smith, rather than saying, I disagree with what you just said about whatever topic, saying that there is this strand, let's actually have the debate because the better idea will win. That's how my brain works.
Yeah, well, here's why. Because this is another form of gatekeeping. When Joe Rogan says, okay, you're cool. Dave Smith is cool. But Jake Shields, he's a Holocaust denier. That's not cool. That's dark and evil and real anti-Semitism. You hear that all the time. They say, are you like a Dave Smith guy or are you a real anti-Semite?
Yeah, Nick, because people want to know if you think lining up people based off of immutable characteristics and shooting them in the back of the head is an acceptable thing to do or not. We already know that you said that you want to do something that's extra legal and contrary to the Constitution of the United States. So if that's your limiting, if you don't have a limiting principle in reference to that, then what is your limiting principle? We've had a conversation in the past. Nick said that he wants an authoritarian Christian imperium in which he's the dictator. So he wants to be a dictator. So number one, I don't think that's going to happen. Number two, what's the limiting principle? Justin says you have to donate 10 or more. Okay, cool. He on that knicker time, though. He's always late. True. All right, Mom, cover your ears. Jake Shields has also has cauliflower ear in CTE. Only Jenna Jameson has taken more shots to the head than him. That is spicy.
Because you know what they say? If you're a real anti-Semite, you're out of the club. You don't get invited on the show. You know, Piers Morgan won't have me on the show. He banned me. Tim Pool banned me. Joe Rogan banned me. And it's like, wait a second.
Yeah, because they don't want to normalize it.
Some people are able to go on these shows and express some form of the view, which is, again, like what you're saying, there's this Israel lobby. But if you go out and say, you know what, 6 million, I'm not buying it. You know, I think this is a political narrative. I think it's atrocity propaganda serving a fifth column. Suddenly they say, well, that's real anti-Semitism. We want nothing to do with that. You know, you remain outside. And so, and look, it's not to me about, you know, people then say, oh, well, you're envious. Look, I love doing my show. I love doing what I do. I want the real truth to prevail. And there's this concept of a limited hangout. This is a
But is it based on truth, Nick? So for instance, right now, if I go and check, the primary documents are on the Holocaust website. They're on the website. Now, I don't read German, so I have no idea. But the claim is that these documents show hundreds of thousands of people being processed through work camps and death camps. And we have things like ordinary men, which is law enforcement liquidating a population of 1,200 over the course of 2 weeks, where they just line people up, shoot them in the back of the head, throw them in a ditch. And they spend 8 hours a day doing that, liquidating people. So are you saying those things didn't happen? Are you saying it didn't happen on a scale that you care about? What are you saying? And is that thing that you're saying rooted in truth?
CIA tool, and I'm sure you've heard of it, but for your audience that maybe hasn't, when they believe that disclosure is inevitable, a secret, a taboo, hidden narrative that they don't want to get out, when it's inevitable that it is going to go out, what they will do is they will leak out some of the truth. The public is so enamored with the new information, they go no further, and they actually don't get to the critical details. And I think that you know, we're basically at that point with the Israel lobby and the Jewish topic. Clearly something is going on.
So you're just distrusting, and that's fine to say that you're distrusting.
No, well, I'm distrusting
I
naturally,
just,
but
yeah. I mean, I think it's fine to, and you are correct, by the way, that there are these operations where they do these limited hangouts. And I'm very aware of that. That is true. And sometimes I have that in my mind when I'm watching something. I'm like, this feels like a limited hangout. Like they're not really kind of getting to the nucleus of the conversation. But I just really disagree with you about like just Dave is just guilty and condemned simply because he's born
I didn't say
Ashkenazi.
because he's Jewish.
Went well in the clip. I think you just went like Dave Jew, and it's like, what does it matter? Dave
I'm
Joe
sick of the
Rogan not
tokenism.
Jew.
I'm sick of the
But,
tokenism.
okay, and I'll tell you another reason why I disagree with that. And we can move on from Dave Smith because I like him, and I'm whoever I like. I don't really care. To adapt my opinions
So why use gas chambers? Why not? Plurality of tactics.
on the basis of yours, but I also just in general feel like I was that person for BLM and I'm genuine. I was totally genuine. And that was kind of my wake up call. BLM, I didn't really accept the victim narrative, maybe a little bit like you, naive, walked into it like, oh, I'm just not going to support this thing. And I don't really want to be a Democrat. And then I dealt with the full weight of an attempted cancellation by the left at first. And kind of like, she's, the token for the right, and people saying, well, they're only platforming her because she's a black person that agrees. And to some degree, maybe that's true. Like, obviously, like there is an element of tokenism, but I'm saying what I believe.
Sure.
I was saying what I believe.
And I don't doubt his sincerity. I don't doubt his sincerity at all.
So why problematize it? That's what I'm trying to get to. So it's then he's out there having to fight amongst these pro-Israel people. He's fighting the same Zionists that we are on the topic of Israel. And on top of that, he's got to deal with Nick Fuentes talking trash about him because it's like, well, this is just, who cares? If he can't help who he is. I couldn't help but I was black and disagreed with BLM. I'm just black and disagree with BLM,
Well, here's the reason why. It's...
That's a whole can of worms, and if we unpacked it, I would be here for 20 minutes. So I'm trying to think of what was substantively said. So what I've heard so far is that Nick started out in Conservative Inc., that he had a bone to pick with Israeli influence in government, that he continued to pick at that bone, and as a result, he was ostracized and pushed to the side by Conservative Inc. He started his own show and was successful through criticizing Conservative Inc., but also trying to claim the America First brand, which I think he has done successfully. All of the dissident right-wing people besides him have burnt out. He thinks that some of the anti-Zionist propaganda in the mainstream news being acceptable, but not the more hardcore narratives being acceptable, is showing how this isn't a true free marketplace of ideas, and that most people are sanitizing for advertisers consciously or subconsciously, and that he wants to have the real conversation. Well, okay. I'm ready for the real conversation, Nick. Let's stop talking about how we can't have the real conversation. Let's have the real conversation. Let's have the real conversation. Let's do it.
A little bit irritating because Dave Smith, for all the flack that he's getting, he remains on YouTube. He's been on YouTube the whole time. He remains on Twitter. He's been...
Cicero says, have you watched Foundation, Connor? No, but last night I actually watched Prometheus. Sorry, quick break. Let's all take a little break. Let's do a breather, okay? Let's do some box breathing. In 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Out 2, 3, 4. In 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Out 2, 3, 4. Okay. Have I been watching Foundation? No, but it's obviously on my list of shows to break down for the Sci-Fi Channel. I'm trying to break down in semi-chronological order. Interesting thing, though, is a lot of Predator movies are set in the present day or the near future. So I'm finding a lot of my present day sci-fi content is heavily stacked with Predator, but I'm going to throw in a couple to mix it up. And Foundation is obviously on the list. So it's probably not for a while, but it's on there. I don't know if I wanted to answer anything else in reference to this. I think I'm just ready to have the conversation. I'm tired of saying that we can't have the conversation. I just want to have the conversation. And I wonder if it's going to be any different than there's a Zionist narrative that supports the existence of the state of Israel and Jews supporting the state of Israel. And I think that narrative is sympathetic. and he thinks that it's not. And then he wants to do extra legal, extra constitutional things in order to implement a Christian theocracy. That might be the totality of the argument. And he's skeptical about some World War II stuff.
And on Twitter the whole time. He has bank accounts, he has payment processors. And now that people are waking up about Israel, they want to invite a Jewish person on to tell us we're not real anti-Semites, you know, we're not Holocaust deniers, but maybe something's wrong with Israel. And here I am, having been banned on YouTube, been banned by banks.
Nah, Prometheus didn't suck. It had like 2 or 3 moments that were pretty fucking stupid. Sorry for the F-bomb, Mom. It had 2 or 3 moments that were pretty stupid. As an example, like when the Cobra worm showed up and the guy was trying to tame it. I think they could have reshot that where he was a biologist trying to capture it for study. I think that would have been better than him just being like, oh, girl, don't worry about it, whatever. You know, like where he was trying to like coo this like wild animal. I think that was kind of stupid. Obviously everybody taking off their masks repeatedly was pretty stupid, but I did think that it was funny that they made fun of it. You know, in the beginning where the guy was like, I'm gonna take off my mask, and everybody's like, you're an idiot. And then he's like, I'm gonna do it anyways because I want to be comfortable. And then he did it. And then everybody was like, yeah, we're gonna take off our masks. Like, even though people are getting infected randomly and dying randomly, we're gonna keep taking off our masks because we want to be comfortable. That was dumb. Some of the biological exposure stuff in the surgeon stuff was dumb. But the general themes of your creations not being what you want them to be, and dominion over your creation, and what if the gods, because they worship the engineers as gods, what if the gods hated you? That was actually, I actually liked all the themes of Prometheus.
Every streaming platform, all of it condemned, life destroyed, and people still are gatekeeping me and saying you're a real anti-Semite. And I'm saying, well, you know, obviously we didn't come far enough. So I don't doubt his sincerity. He's a big boy. You know, he doesn't mind that I'm trash talking him. And I still consider him a friend, even though I've been critical of him. But, you know, we have to go a little bit further than to say,
yeah, and the David psychology, Charles Burrows, Prometheus is a million times better when you watch David from the Alien Covenant first. Viewing David as evil the entire time makes the movie more fascinating. Yeah, Charles Burrows. So I've seen a lot of clips from Prometheus and from Alien Covenant before I even watched it. And so I always knew that David was this like creepy, inhuman manipulator who like resented humanity. And what I liked about knowing that going into it is there's actually this tension between him and Shaw's husband or boyfriend, where Shaw's husband or boyfriend keeps giving David shit for not being human and not really understanding like emotion or what words mean or anything like that. And so he keeps giving him flack, effectively calling him like furniture. And David has this like smirk the entire time. And there's actually a moment right before he poisons him with the black goo where he says like, what would you do in order to speak with your creators and uncover this mystery that's driving you? And the husband or the boyfriend or whatever says, anything and everything. And Dave almost uses that moral license to be like, oh, you would do anything and everything to achieve your goal? Well, I'll do anything and everything in order to achieve my goal. And then he poisons him, which I actually thought was interesting. It was an interesting plot moment. Cornelia says, no, Nick is debanked since a decade ago. Also, no PayPal, credit card processing, etc. Yeah, for his business, I'm sure. I wonder if he can get a personal checking account, though. Would anybody like do a social media check before he can get a personal checking account? Well, QC John says, as a blood member of the Ashnazi devout charcoal and wood smoker tribe of the Grill Hottest, I disagree with our savior, Hank Hill. I believe his narrow urethra made him impatient for heat, thus propane. All right, anyways.
Something's up with the Zionists or Israel. It's not Israel. It is the Jews. And I think that Dave Smith...
See, and that's, so is that the deeper mystery? The deeper mystery is that it's not just Israel, it's also the Jews. Well, I mean, the Jews are sympathetic with Israel, like to a tune of 2-1 or 3-1. Jews are sympathetic to Israel. I'm going to write that down as a debate point. What is it? Sorry, real quick. What was it? It's not Israel. It's the Jews. That doesn't contradict any of the narrative that I've built in my head.
Being a Jewish libertarian, I don't think he's ready to go that far. I don't think
Well,
he
I
is
want to
that
know
far.
what you mean by that. So I'm just so we're clear. Is your perspective that if people don't platform you, it's because they don't want to go too far?
It may be that they aren't that far ideologically,
Okay.
but then that's my job to push them farther. And that's why I say it.
To what end? To what end? So Christian imperium, extra constitutional barring of Jews from finance and owning corporations, extrajudicial deportations based off of religion. To what end? Because effectively that's the question, right? So if it's his job to lead people descriptively up to the point that it's not just Israel that has undue influence over the United States government, and that's bad, and we should do something about it. It's also sympathetic Jews within the United States who are pushing this. Therefore, what? What are we going to do with that description?
That's why I say, you know, and
Or maybe they just disagree with you. Have
you're
you
a
ever,
good
but that's
example.
Charles Burrow says, yeah, there's a lot of depth in those movies that I think a lot of people missed on first viewing. They went in expecting another aliens movie, but got a philosophical movie about androids and gods and worship and legacy and creation. Yes, Charles Burrows. And I actually enjoyed it a lot. Quick shill time because we are down to our last hour. Like the stream, that's free, helps us in the algorithm, lets other people know that we're live. Engage in chat. There's lots of funny, interesting people in there, even though they piss me off every single day and drive me crazy. Watch the VODs and comment on the VODs. That's another free way that you can support the channel. And as a result, I get that sweet, sweet AdSense revenue. If you have money burning a hole in your pocket and or you're enjoying the content, please do a $5, $10, $2 super chat. I appreciate any money. Every dollar helps the channel grow. And then also, once memberships are turned back on, please become a member or gift the membership to other people. Parasocially love you. I think I'm going to grab some water and use the restroom, but I'll be right back.
another thing.
Then
Maybe they
should have
just
me on the
disagree
show,
with you.
but I'm gatekept.
Okay, but if the more important, so for me, if like I care deeply about what's happening to the Palestinians, obviously, I've made a point to talk about that. And I very much see what you're speaking about, that there is this coordinated, very sinister movement. I think it operates on the left and the right, whether it's the ADL or APAC, the money is flowing to instantly cancel people, to get them fired. And it's vicious. I mean, it is dirty business. And to survive it, it's hard for most people to even survive it when they go through it because they're so smeared. It's like an effective tar and feathering. And for it to happen when you were 18 is ridiculous. But at the same time, if I'm going to use my platform to speak about that, I want to make sure that I'm hosting people that can explain that to people that otherwise may not even be aware of that.
Right.
So if you're going to host, why are you sitting this person down on your show? Well, because we're having a conversation about something that's important. I can either learn from that person, right? Or I think that this person can teach something to my audience, right? If I were to host you and that was the clip that's coming out, do you think people are going to go, yeah, that just made me realize here I am just believing that we should, I'm a normal conservative like you. You said you were 18. I like these people. And the first thing I hear Nick Fuentes say is, Dave, they're not going to think that you're a good person.
This is concern trolling. I'm sorry,
no,
but this is tone policing, and this is concern trolling.
It's not. No, it's not.
It is
it's
absolutely.
Not tone policing. Hold up, let's back it up because I'm going to let you speak. It is not tone policing. What I am saying is that you just went through the fact that you genuinely were coming up, that you were a conservative, you genuinely liked Ben Shapiro, you genuinely thought these things. So that wasn't you would not look back on yourself and say, well, that I was problematic. You just would be like, that makes sense.
Right.
And I'm saying to you that the majority of people have that perspective. You don't have to assign an evil motive. You get into something because you believe it. That's it. It's just that simple.
Okay.
And if you're then going to have somebody who's condemning them, what are we learning? If you're just going to say, you're this, you're that, it's like you've forgotten yourself. Like some people just aren't there wherever you are.
Okay, but I missed the part where I condemned him. And I talked about the Dave Smith part repeatedly. And by the way, you're mixing it up and saying, well, if people watch a show, what are they going to think if they see that clip?
I'm just trying to say to you, why would someone maybe say,
can I talk? Can I answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Come on.
Go ahead.
I mean, so,
Oh, I missed it. It got spicy?
Look, I'm a funny guy. I'm bombastic. I'm provocative. That's part of it. And you know what? You can concern troll and tone police about, whether I
tone police. I wouldn't have you on if I'm tone policing and playing your clips.
Jew.
Sorry, Justin, I don't think the Jews had rights in Europe until Napoleon emancipated them. Well, Justin, black, like contemporary, I think Napoleon was early 19th century. Black folk didn't have rights in the United States of America. I think that was bad. Like, generally speaking, this is actually what pisses me off is I was raised to believe and still believe that we are human beings, that ultimately what separates us as a species is less than we imagine, and that we can all push for the things that make humans happy, which is ideally waking up, being productive, taking care of your family, taking care of your community, and that's about it. That's really all humans need in order to be like happy, satisfied, purposeful, etc. And so these tribal differences are important. What ideology runs the world is important, but ultimately, even if somebody's a Jew, or they're black or brown or Hispanic or Muslim or Christian or Hindu or whatever, they should all be afforded some level of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, dignity, purpose, et cetera, to the maximal degree that humanity is capable of delivering those human goods. And so when somebody says, oh, well, the Jews didn't have rights until Napoleon, I'm kind of wondering what your point is. Because Justin, even if you don't mean it this way, the implication is that Jews shouldn't have rights because 200 years ago, they didn't. So you can say that that's not what you said, but that's the implication of what you said. So should we, as a country, pass a law and say, if you're Jewish, either ethnically or religiously, you are no longer able to keep property? And is that quote unquote cure better than the quote unquote disease, which, by the way, I don't agree is a cure or a disease, of the Israel lobby having undue influence over American politics? Mega Zero says, Valor, you love it. It's like having a crap ton of siblings. You're right. It is like arguing with brothers and sisters, 100%. Bud123 says, did trying to cancel Nick Fuentes at first result in him being further right than if he was never canceled? Yeah, probably. Because nobody ever answered his questions in reference to Israel and the Jewish lobby. The answers that they gave were very lackluster, and then they tried to destroy his career. So, except oppressors, right? Yeah. World-renowned GeoHound says, Connor, smiley face. Well, all right.
We're laughing during the clip.
Yeah,
You and I are
it's
laughing.
funny.
It's funny. And
I'm
that's
laughing
why
at you making fun of me. I don't mind you making fun of me.
Yeah, and I don't
I'm
mind
chill.
you making fun of me if you've ever done that. I mean, and I'm chill too.
No, I don't care. I'm not, like I said, I told you it's
What you said was missing the point and you still don't get it? Oh, gotcha. You're talking to LB. My bad.
I like that about you because I think that you're hardcore. I think we're kind of similar in that way. We don't have thin skin. So I appreciate that about you. And I know that Dave Smith is the same way. And I said on that show and other show,
still going to be lifting while I'm listening.
I like him. I think he's a good guy. And I agree with you. I think he's sincere and I respect him. And I think he's a good person, actually.
He is.
But I do think that we disagree. And to the extent that I'm critical of the situation, it's not a personal directed at him. I know maybe it comes across that way or it sounds like that to you, but I've said it repeatedly on my show and that's not the only time I talked about it. I said the problem is this idea, and again, intentional or not, that we need permission from a Jewish person sitting there so that we're not real anti-Semites to talk about the issues. Yeah. And I also disagree with Dave Smith on the extent of it. Now, maybe he fundamentally disagrees. I'd love to talk to him about it. That'd be fine with me. But it does come from a place of disagreement. I'm not condemning him.
I think he genuinely just disagrees with you. And that's kind of the point I'm trying to say. When I say don't internet too hard, is that sometimes you can assign a conspiracy where it's just not, that's not the motive. Like for me, I just wanted to have Dave on my show because I had him on before and I think he's great and I like his stuff. He's one of my favorite follows. That's it.
Never assign to malice what can be explained by stupidity.
I don't even think about the fact, well, he's a Jew, so let me have him on to tokenize the situation. I don't care. I just like him, you know?
Yeah.
And in terms of why I could try to appreciate where if
Hi, Jonahzilla. Good to see you.
somebody's trying to wake somebody up to something, you know, you could dump, I guess, a bucket of ice on someone when they're sleeping and wake them up. Or you
Sorry, this is more important than the content. Bud123 says, I have gone to the gym at least 3 times a week for 5 weeks now. My chest, triceps, and biceps look more defined, and I got stronger, but I did not gain any weight. Based.
You could kind of say, okay, you know, Are you starting to, with my sisters, we have this debate right now about me being a Catholic, my sisters are not Catholic. I don't need to be like, you must understand why the Catholic faith is right. And it's like, I got there. They're not.
Cornelia says, why should we tolerate people who hate us, control our financial system, our media, intellectual centers, and foreign policy? Would you support a radical Salafist in control of these powers? I think that plenty of Anglos, Celts, Iberians, Spanish, Italians, Greeks, some Turks, some Middle Eastern and North African folk also participate in finance, media, intellect, etc. And oftentimes the agendas that get assigned exclusively to the Jews are also beneficial to these other people. And so I think you're scapegoating our systems onto one ethno-religious group and assigning them a religious motivation that many of them don't have. You explain it through ethno-religious supremacy. I often explain it through like nihilism, materialism, and self-worship, which many people are guilty of. So, yeah. Including Anglos, who also run a lot of our social power structures.
There yet. Like, chill. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Here's where I was. My sisters were Democrat when I got into politics. And we've always kept a sense of humor about things. So it never became this toxic name calling stuff. Well, it was, but it was like with a sense of humor about it. Like my sisters would be like, have fun at your Klansman rally. And I'd be like, cool, because I'd ask her to watch my cat. But the idea that I think that at the moment that I recognize something or at the moment that I become something, everyone else must therefore become that thing. I think that's asinine. I do.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that. Look, my show is my platform, and I say what I feel about the situation, and my audience is already there with me. You know, I'm doing a show, and by the way, I don't even do it for the audience. I say what I say. I said it 8 years ago when it really wasn't popular. I said it 5 years ago when it was a little more popular. I'm saying it now, and you know, so and that's the difference, I guess, is this is a common critique of me and my audience. People say, well, are you being tactful? Are you being strategic? These kinds of things.
Which is also my criticism of Stephen, by the way. Lol.
I'm not setting plays. You know, I will acknowledge I'm impulsive. I am bombastic. I'm out there. I'm a maniac, you know. But my job is to put the truth out there.
Cornelia says, the question is, are you okay with a radical Salafist becoming president or by AT&T or Comcast? Yeah, not really. I don't think I can prevent a Salafist from buying AT&T or Comcast. But I don't think that you've proven that the Talmud has radicalized a small sect of ethno-religious supremacist Jews who view the Goyim as cattle and who have, you know, created all of society in order to fleece them to the exclusive benefit of this, you know, Ubermensch class. I don't think you've proven that in the fucking slightest. And then same thing with the Christian nationalists. So the same way, let's say that Talmudic Judaism was a specific subsect of Jews who were ethno-religious supremacists who viewed the rest of the world as cattle, and they had disproportionate influence in American government and American power structures. The same way that I would be hostile to a ethno-religious Jewish supremacist taking over vast swaths of the American government and power structure is the same way that I would be hostile to a Salafist or a jihadist or a Christian nationalist.
I am the bucket of ice
who wants to use extrajudicial and extra constitutional authority in order to purge society of the unclean.
Cold water, and I'm dumping it on people, and some people are going to get it, and some people it's going to take them longer. I'll let other people set the plays. I'll let other people kind of do the breadcrumbs and do this incremental approach. Me, I kind of figured it out. I was off to the races from the beginning, and I just want to cut to the chase and get to the most fundamental part of the idea. And so, you know, that's why some
goalpost status obliterated. No, I literally said that I wouldn't support the thing that you said, but there's two other things that I also wouldn't support for the same reasons. Please tell me how the goalpost was shifted, Cornelius. I don't think you'll be able to. So you want the simple answer to your question. Would I support a ethno-religious supremacist Jew controlling all of society or controlling vast swaths of society? No. Is that clean enough for you? Now you got your clip. Now the added addendum is I don't want any ethno-religious supremacists in charge of my society.
People don't like me, granted. But I think the big picture is that I have been suppressed for 10 years because, I mean, we could sit here all day long and say, were you mean to this one? Were you mean to that one? Was this out of pocket? The fact of the matter is I have been more censored than anybody for 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's the real reason. So, and this.
Yeah, tally bots. The more quote unquote radical the Jew, the more insular the Jew. It is overwhelmingly secular and assimilated Jews who are overrepresented in politics and business. The Talmud has nothing to do with it. Yeah. So I'm of the opinion that Tally's opinion is more in line with reality. So you're going to have to find me evidence that there's this secret, not even secret, maybe they're open, ethno-religious supremacist organization that's running the United States.
But you're not still being censored. I'm just trying to provide feedback.
I am though.
Provide feedback to what you just said in that clip. Like, why wouldn't they have me on their platform? I'm not tone policing. Go on your show, say whatever you want. Actually, I would make the argument that you're kind of tone policing our shows by saying, why won't they? Look, whatever. I'm just saying, don't assign evil motive where there just might not be one. Like,
I don't think I am.
Okay.
I was mad that you wouldn't. Well, you don't believe me, but I was mad that you're saying, okay. You're mad that, well, I was mad that you wouldn't have me on the show because, look, I stand you so hard on Twitter. I was Candace Owens, and the groypers were there for you for Daily Wire, and they wanted the collab so bad last year. And you kept saying, well, we'll do it. But then you said,
what are you talking about? Let's back this up.
Okay.
Because I do want to get to this. This is actually something that I find to be very funny. First and foremost, because I don't know what a groyper is. Okay. This is, and I will give you credit where credit is due. You have managed to infect the brains of 40-plus-year-old men. And that is actually, I think, the most compelling part about you, is I watched as I was coming up in my career, and I will say I've had 4 kids in the last few.
You've managed to infect the brains of a bunch of 40-year-old men. No, Nick's demographics go younger. Sorry for the voice crack. Nick's demographics go substantively younger. I would say 15 to 40-year-old men. And did Candace say that she had 4 kids? Jesus. Sorry.
Mad that you're saying, okay. You're mad that, well, I was mad that you wouldn't have me on the show being so and had last year.
Let's back this up.
Okay.
Because I do want to get to this. This is actually something that I find to be very funny. First and foremost, because I don't know what a groyper is. Okay.
She's talking about. I will
give you credit where credit is due.
Critics.
You have managed to infect the brains of 40-plus-year-old men. And that is actually, I think, the most compelling part about you, is I watched as I was coming up in my career, and I will say I've had 4 kids in the last few years. I don't pay attention to. I think you were.
It's at 54:41. And it stopped allowing me to pause.
I have to go a little bit further. You so hard on Twitter. I was stand so bad.
To be is brains. Telling part about for you.
There we go. Oh, stop! Don't frickin'.
I watched as I was coming up in my career, and I will say I've had 4 kids in the last few years. I don't pay attention to. I think you were on Cozy TV.
Yes,
you were banned everywhere. I only know that because 40-year-old men were obsessively asking me to come out and condemn you. I'll name one of them, Seth Dillon of the Babylon Bee. He lives in a groyper simulation. And I'm just, to me, interested in the idea that the 18-year-old kid who's been banned everywhere, and you have to jump through the hoops to watch him on this obscure cozy.tv, has managed to completely send you mad. That's fascinating to me. Credit where credit is due. The groypers are true.
They're really good at triggering people. This is true.
Truly living in the minds of neocons. There's no question about it. Okay. So for me, genuinely, I didn't watch your content. I got to tell you, you're not for moms. I'm very into the anti.
Whatever 4690 says, Connor, do you think Nick is simply wrong on everything he says? No, I don't. I think that Nick actually has a pretty strong control of descriptive reality. I think he commits sins of omission, lies of omission, where he emphasizes certain historical events to the detriment of others in order to help boost his narrative. I think he ignores contradictory evidence, but no, I think actually descriptively, Nick has quite a strong command of 20th century history. Where I disagree with Nick is oftentimes in prescription. So if you were saying like, oh, what I would say is I would probably minimize or sweep for the Zionist lobby and the Jews, where, yeah, I would want to reel them in a bit. I would basically want to rebuild Gaza. I would want to freeze the borders. I would want to stop settlements in the West Bank. I would want to come to a two-state solution in the state of Israel. And the Zionists and the might not like that. Then when it comes to Jews, like prescriptively, it seems like Nick has implied that Jewish sympathizers within the United States who are in control of media, businesses, politics, AIPAC, ADL, etc., they're just too powerful. And so they have to be politically and financially sidelined. I'm a Republican. I care about the Republic. I care about the rule of law. There is a 0% chance. There is a greater chance of me. I'm trying to think of something that you would more likely get me to be able to do. But the point is that there's 0% chance that you will get me to ever support repealing the First Amendment of the United States or extrajudicially circumventing the First Amendment of the United States. 0% chance. So the fact that this guy is quote unquote on my team is repulsive to me. Tallybot says, Connor in chat mean people who are either ethnically or religiously Jewish. Yeah, Jewish is a very versatile term. Justin says, what Tally doesn't understand was that these irreligious Jews probably had religious grandparents who had antipathy towards non-Jews. Remember, the Holocaust was 80 years ago? So they most likely were very anti-Gentile at that time. Yeah, but as an example, who is it? Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart's Jewish, and he seems to love the Goy. He seems to be a Goy lover, right? He spends all of his time and energy in public advocacy for non-Jews, you know, for Americans, to be honest, because he's American. But that's the way that he spent the past like 10 or 20 years since he left The Daily Show. I know he's back, but he spent all of his advocacy on like firefighter advocacy. Justin says, so maybe Jews in another 50 years will be very cool. Well, Justin, I would say that's an easier goal than disbarring Jews from power, right? Bull Media says, Nick Fuentes views black people as inferior and would gladly ship them all to Africa. I mean, yeah. What is it with white people and borders? I fucking love borders. Holy shit, I love borders. Okay, it's really interesting listening to someone talk about me and how we control the world, and I'm here struggling to raise my family. Give me some of the Jewish influence for the love of God. Tally says, Kay, are you not on the Zog payroll? I can make a call. Can you make a call for me too? Because I'm also over here shilling for the Jews for free, you know? Fotimo says, whites were sidelined in the same way by the Civil Rights Act. We wouldn't have Dilbert if it wasn't for Scott Adams getting denied promotions for being a white man. Interesting. Whatever says, Jon Stewart said Jews should unite against white people. Find me the quote in the context. Cornelius says, I'm white and black people should hate white people because white people need to do better. Also, Jon Stewart, Leibowitz, not me. I'm Jewish. Well, find me the quotes. Find me the quotes.
Back stuff like no one's I'm not tucking in at night after 5 days a week of a show and 4 kids being like, what's on Cozy
Conservative liberalism says hashtag not all Jews. Indeed. Hashtag not all Jews.
TV? What's Nick Fuentes saying over at Cozy TV?
You're not?
No, I am not. And so the first time that I started seeing your clips was kind of at the same moment that I got fired, because at the same time ish is when you got put back on Twitter, and I am active on Twitter, and I'm seeing clips here and I'm seeing clips there, and I did see the clips of you.
Cornelia says, I just did Connor direct quotes. Jon Stewart, I'm white and black people should hate white people because white people need to do better. Also, Jon Stewart, not me, I'm Jewish. All right, so you said that's a direct quote. So let's go ahead and pull up your direct quote. Google, I'm white and black people should hate white people because White people need to do better. Not me. I'm Jewish. Okay. I just typed in an exact quote and I didn't get it. So feel free to send me something better. Is it the problem with systemic racism on, I don't have 16 minutes and I don't want to get copyright struck. But is it this? Is it the problem with white people? Am I going to have to, we'll add that to tomorrow. We'll add it to tomorrow. Why not? Why don't we look at, you know, they say good goy, right? So maybe John is being a good Jew. So we'll add that to the docket.
Speaking about the Christ is King.
Let's get a few more minutes in.
A scenario, some which were hilarious, just kind of getting into the theology of it. And I'm starting to go, okay, I'm kind of getting this Nick Fuentes thing, especially when Jeremy Boring, then the CEO of the Daily Wire, hosted this.
Whatever says, how about Stewart's show, The Problem with White People? Is that the episode or something else?
Christ is King audio live. And that was the first time I ever heard your backstory. So I genuinely was so, I guess, not blind to the groyper movement, but like how
we'll watch it tomorrow.
I guess how influential you were that these people, as Jeremy admitted in that audio, were watching your show, which was on an app that I had never even heard about. So I want to give credit where credit is due. But your strategy of, I'm going to go on my show and call this person out for not having me on the show when you didn't ask to come on the show. And you had a line of communication because of some legal stuff that was happening in the background where I was asking you to do a decent thing and tell the truth about the fact that we didn't have this relationship that I think some people thought that we had going on in the background, a political relationship or like strategizing together. So I just think it was ridiculous. Like, I'm like, if you wanted to come on the show, why didn't you just send a big boy message and say, hey, Candace, we should collab?
And by the way, I've sent a big boy message to Nick. I said, hey, bro, I want to talk to you about this stuff. And he has not responded.
And that's what I mean when I say,
Justin, we'll continue this tomorrow. Okay. Worst case scenario, we'll continue this on Wednesday. I do think that this is good enough content that I effectively want to react to all of it in 2 parts. And so I will. And so what was it? Tomorrow in the beginning, I'm going to skip about 45 minutes of the Brittany Simon video because frankly, it's just about how she came up in the space. And for about an hour, she criticizes Destiny and Counterpoints. I have a feeling that it's going to be quite pause heavy for me. So that might run like half of the day. Then what I would say is I would want to do the Daily Show with Jon Stewart thing just to kind of prove to groypers that oftentimes all their like things where it's like the Jews hate us and they want to kill us. Well, if you add it within context, you're kind of being a pussy about it. But Justin, I'll 100% do the second half of this interview as a breakdown because frankly, I have a lot of heat for these people. So if I have a lot of heat for these people, I should probably hear everything they say. We're going to be finishing up the Candace Owens versus Nick Fuentes conversation / debate. Apparently, there's going to be some race realism, race and IQ conversation starters, so it should get pretty spicy. I don't want to delay it too much, so let's go ahead and get it cracking.
Calling people names because we don't maybe want to confront that there is some substance to this question. But then you guys kind of, or maybe it sounds like it did start as an online movement. Who are the groypers behind the scenes? Do you have communication with these people? Yeah. They're real, obviously they're real human beings, but my point is that like, is this movement, like you guys are on a group chat and you know these individuals? Can we get a demographic? Are they older? Are they younger? Who are the groypers?
Well, they are real human beings. They're all young white men. Or there's other men too. I mean, some of them are Hispanic, some of them are Black, some of them are Jewish for that matter, but they're mostly young men, college age, Generation Z, some of them even high school aged, and all of them very Christian, very Catholic also. They're fans of the show. You know, a lot of people say have this cult-like following. people watch the show and they adopt the political viewpoint, the religious viewpoint. And so they're basically far right, pro America, Catholic, at that time, big Trump supporters and young guys.
Okay. All right. We have to watch another Nick Fuentes clip. I think we should definitely let's watch the first one that you showed me, Skylar.
Why is it that Candace Owens will interview Harvey Weinstein before she'll talk to me?
So true.
Am I
So
really
glad,
that
so glad you agree
bad?
with yourself.
People said when Candace Owens split with Daily Wire, people begged her to do a collaboration with me. They said, talk to Nick Fuentes. You stole all his talking points. Talk to
True.
Nick Fuentes. You get all your ideas from him, all your slogans. He was a martyr. He made the sacrifices that made it popular for you to do this.
True. I think the dissident right did steal a lot of shit from Nick Fuentes and presents it in more palatable ways so they don't get canceled.
She said, oh, I can't because I'm on YouTube, but I also can't have him on my website because of some lawsuit. And
That's
all
so
this.
crappy to me. That part's really crappy to me. I have to say,
Are we doing
watching
this
it back.
again?
No, I do want to say we don't have to get into it, but that's crappy to me because it was like, I don't know. I just think that I try to do a really good job of being a human being offline. You know what I mean? And if people are going through stuff or whatever, and that was real, like that's not like, oh my God, like she's trying to be a victim. It was very real. My life was kind of, you saw, it was thrown up in the air, but we don't need to focus on that. But I do want to get to the point. Do you actually believe that I was getting all my ideas from you? Like, do you actually believe that I was watching Cozy TV? Because then somebody showed me a clip of you saying the same thing. Because I guess you said in the same week, or you said last week, I was talking about this. Now this week, Candace is talking about it. And it was pertaining to the PBS documentary, The Savage Peace, which was about the German genocide that took place after the war had ended. And that documentary opened up my eyes a lot to the fact that we had only been told kind of one strand regarding World War II.
Oh my God, this annoys the shit out of me. So because the Soviets were barbarous monsters, and because they were allies with the Western world, we have to own all the bad shit that the Soviets did to the Germans after the war. I hate that shit. I think it's so stupid. But anyways, that's fine. These people are idiots. They can believe what they want to believe. Responding to chat, just because there's interesting comments and chats, they say you cannot debate a delusion, and a lot of these people are delusional. No, you can still debate it. You just might be a crazy person for trying and a masochist. Whatever 4690 says, why didn't Liberia work as it has the same constitution? Well, probably because they were a bunch of freed slaves who went out to Africa and they didn't have anything. And so as a result, they started their own country. And then once they started their own country, they actually purchased and enslaved people back in West Africa. So I would say there was an inherent contradiction within Liberia. That being said, I would be shocked if West Africa in the post-colonial period isn't getting better now compared to how it was a generation ago or a generation or two ago. Matter of fact, I would say, like, isn't Nigeria supposed to be doing quite well? How is Liberia doing today? Liberia is currently facing a mix of challenges and progress while enjoying 2 decades of peace. Okay, that's an update. The country grapples with persistent economic issues like poverty, high inflation, and limited job opportunities. However, there are also positive developments, including a recent decline in poverty and improvements to the fiscal outlook. Okay, so I don't know. Liberia might be doing okay. 2 decades ago, it was in civil war. Liberia in 2024. You could watch that video if you wanted to see what was going on. But I think Nigeria today is often held up as a place that's doing okay. Is it Nigeria or is it Niger? One of them is supposed to have like a pretty decent public transport system. Is it Niger? Nigeria public transport. I could have sworn to God one of them had a like fairly modern subway system. Transforming transport in Nigeria's megacity. So read that one. Lagos. Lagos today. I don't know, bro. You go watch some YouTube documentaries. You tell us how Nigeria and Lagos are doing. I don't know.
And I told my audience they should watch it. And there was a clip of you kind of suggesting that I got that from you. So did you actually believe that I had gotten that from you, or that I was watching your show and stealing your ideas?
Not that one. I don't know what that's all about. The
Okay.
Berman thing. But look, I mean, you left Daily Wire with the whole Christ is King, America first. For years, that's what I was known for. Now, if you want to say you never heard of me until a couple of years ago, or
No, I heard of you in 2019.
you said earlier though that you didn't really watch anything or know anything until about a year ago.
Yeah.
If that's what you say, okay, that's fine. But it'd be a pretty stunning coincidence. And I will say I heard from other people. I'm not going to say who, but I heard from a mutual friend. He watched my show back in 2020. Maybe that person's lying. I don't know that, but I'd heard that from multiple people. So.
You can name the person, because I'm telling you. So, and I'll ask you this question again. So you said Christ is king. So that's very interesting.
Mhm.
So you think that any person that says Christ is king?
Oh no, I didn't say that.
Okay, because I actually do want to understand this. I'm genuinely pushing back
No,
here,
it's an
because
interesting
I
question.
was very confused by this. I'm like, Ye just named his whole album Jesus is King,
Mhm.
right? Or 2 albums ago was
Yeah.
Jesus is King. It was definitely a moment, a cultural zeitgeist that had this rapper to come out and start singing about Christ, like he did early on when he did the Jesus Walk stuff. And I was just like, does Nick actually believe? Like, I genuinely was not watching your show. It's the only thing I can tell you.
Okay.
I have friends that were, I will definitely say, male men between the ages of
You guys are all not freaking out, but you're all talking about the white genocide thing from the Jubilee episode. When those people say white genocide, we know what they mean. They're not doing that in good faith. They are doing it in good faith. They genuinely believe that there is an anti-European conspiracy theory in order to miscegenate the European ethno-religious stock out of existence. They think that Jews are manipulating Middle Eastern and North Africans and West Africans to go to Europe for economic benefits, and then for a culture of permissive attitudes towards race to eventually blot out Northern Europeans. They believe that. Now, what I would do, because this is effectively where I had a struggle session with Lauren Southern about it, is that there's plenty of reasons for Middle Eastern and North Africans to go to Europe and to go to the United States besides the Jews manipulated them to do it. And then just because Hispanic people, Black people, Middle Eastern, North African people do go to Europe or the United States for economic benefits, doesn't mean that like half Northern European, half Castizo babies are somehow inferior to Northern European whites. If you care about that kind of shit, I don't know what to tell you. Like, learn how to line dance, learn how to sing Gaelic songs, dress up in lederhosen, and have only white babies. I don't give a shit. But at the same time, like, acting like, oh my God, we're being killed, when realistically what's happening is your son is dating a big booty Latina. It sounds kind of stupid to me.
of like 30 and 40 are watching your show.
Yeah.
There is, and I would say 40 and beyond, like I just said, are watching your show. I would imagine you have a very male, internet savvy audience. I am terrible at the internet. Like, I mean, it is embarrassing. I'm basically a grandma when it comes to the internet. My husband thinks he's like, how are you a person that people watch the internet? You don't even know how to use the internet. I just don't love tech. Tech is not really my thing. I like to communicate. I'm a woman. I like to speak, but I don't really like to figure out how all this stuff works. And so once you got banned, I wouldn't have seen your stuff. But then as soon as you were back on Twitter, I started seeing your clips all the time because you started trending. Like, you were trending the day that you got let back onto X, you were trending. And I was like, okay, Nick is trending. Clips recently just were trending about you. So I think if you had been on X that whole time, and you said, you were like, you've never seen my stuff, that would be a little ridiculous. But genuinely, like, when you're starting a family, and like, as soon as I am done with the podcast, it got to be
I don't
straight back into mommy mode. Just like I said, it's not female content. I would not describe you as like all the moms are lining up to watch Nick from Tucker. Like, Nick Fuentes is definitely encourage you to like.
I want to marry someone that looks like me, that comes from a similar background, because I want my kids to look like me. I want my grandkids to look like me.
But sorry, I just want to make sure, did you say I'm a racialist or I'm a racist?
For a long time, I would say I'm racialist. Now I just say I'm racist.
Okay, so when you say you're racist, because these definitions get changed around, racist, anti-Semitism gets expanded. What do you mean when you say I'm a racist? Because I think most people watching this would go, if you are a racist
Right.
in the traditional sense of the term, why are you on this podcast, right? Wouldn't you just go, you know what, Candace is black and she's therefore I don't want to speak to her.
Right.
Certainly not going on to your
Sapien Green says, Connor, sex with random people isn't something you can't control. Sapient Green, what about me as a person, or what about my content where I constantly criticize promiscuous people and promiscuous homosexuals and Destiny's personal lifestyle? What makes you think that I am an advocate for random Africans to have promiscuous sex? What about me or my content makes you think that's my position? I hope you said that in order to give me a fucking stroke, because you almost gave me a stroke.
show and saying, why won't Candace have me on? That doesn't really seem to line up with the traditional sense of the idea racist, though.
Yeah, and I'm using it. I'm being a little tongue in cheek. I mean, for the purpose of understanding, I'd say my views are I'm a racialist, but I do think that we need to deconstruct this idea of racism in the sense that, look.
AF Racing says, Connor, you don't remember going to basic regulation after you joined the Marines? Ignore the fact that you guys call basic training boot camp. What about it? What about boot camp? Yes, I remember going. What's your point?
You're black, I'm white. It is what it is. For my entire life, people have been walking around in eggshells about the subject of race, about white people being racist. Can I say this? Can I say that? Can I have this opinion? And me, I'm sort of, Gavin McInnes said it like this. He said, you're kind of post-racist. You're sort of after this craze where everything was racist. It's sort of this recognition that we live in a heavily racial world. And, look, sometimes we have racist feelings like I want to live in a white neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to live in a black neighborhood. If they were all like you, obviously it'd be a different story. But when we think of a black neighborhood, we know.
Okay, that's free association. You can do that in a liberal society.
What that means and why the property value.
But that's
cheap.
Black American. So this is why I want to understand this idea better, because, and this is kind of something my cousin has said, which I guess you could say is a racist statement, but she says that white people in America are the white trash of white people in the world, meaning that like there's a special category of uniquely that you don't see when you're dealing with like white Americans here, that if you went across to like Switzerland, you wouldn't see this version of a white person necessarily, or this, you maybe went to the continent of Africa, you don't see this version of a black person either. Like even if you went to the tribes out in Africa that still exist, they would be a far cry from a Black American living in a neighborhood in Compton, right? So I'm trying to understand if you think that it's all Black people are like this, or if your world is kind of colored by, this is what's going on in America, this has failed for 1,000 reasons. Welfarism has definitely, Black people in 1940s, stand up. My grandfather, I talk about that denigration and the corrosion of culture. That's happening. White, Black, whatever you want to name it, there is this intentional corrosion of culture. So do you think it's literally, well, this is just what a Black person is when they come out? Or do you think that post welfare, LBJ, Great Society, this is what Black Americans have become, and I have a right to respond to that and say that as a white man, I don't want to live there?
Well, I think it's more nature than people would like to believe. There's this classic tension of, is it nature, is it nurture, is it cultural, or is it...
Short stack Goblin, you asshole. Connor includes the eastern side of Africa as West Africa. Got it. No, I consider West Africa as sub-Saharan Africa. If it's a Bantu or Bantu cousin, that's West Africa. If it's Arabic or a whatever, like Arabic cousin language, then that's North Africa, which includes East Africa and the Horn.
Intrinsic, is it racial? And I've always been on the latter side of this among conservatives. Conservatives like to say it's all culture. Black America is the way it is because of hip hop music and the Great Society and that kind of stuff. And I think the uncomfortable reality is a big part of it is intrinsic. One of the big arguments against the abolition of slavery in the 1860s is that when Europeans colonized Africa, they hadn't discovered the wheel. There's no two-story buildings. There's no writing. There's no written language. Missionaries had to go to Africa in the last century and invent it for the African people because there's no recorded history. They didn't have writing.
So Egypt is not in Africa.
Well, Egypt is a different race. The Egyptians were not black.
Okay, but you said when they went to Africa, so I just want to...
The interior of Africa in the late 19th century.
And by the way, he's talking about West and South Africa right now. I don't know if this is entirely true. The reason why the Malian Empire, Mali. So Mali is right here. It's basically on the south side of the Sahara. And so you could consider this part of West Africa, but a lot of their cultural achievements are going to be because of the Bedouin traveling across the Sahara into Timbuktu. And so what Nick would argue, of course, I'm trying to do the exception to Nick's line of argumentation that there was no wheel and no two-story buildings and no written language. I'm pretty sure that if I brought up Mali and Timbuktu as examples, he would say, well, realistically, these are colonial Arabic achievements, right? I'm pretty sure that's what he would say. Because Timbuktu was like a center for learning, but it was a joint West African Tuareg. I don't know if are Tuaregs in North Africa? Yeah. It's like a Tuareg and West African joint cultural venture. And the Tuaregs and the Arabs were the ones who brought Timbuktu and all the books and the libraries of Timbuktu. I'm assuming that's what he would say. So I played a anti-racist chess piece. He played one back. Zenith says, it's crazy that Elon did a whole press event where he said, oh, well, we'll fix the PEPFAR cuts. Of course, that was just a mistake, and then didn't restore the funding. Yep, 100%. Evil as shit. I know it will be difficult, but don't shoot Steven. I won't. Don't worry about it.
It's scrambled
Okay,
for
so
Africa.
we're now knocking Egypt out of Africa.
Well, Egypt is part of northern Africa,
Right, but
sub-Saharan
it's
Africa.
You said Africa, so I'm not trying to get a gotcha. I'm just responding. You're saying
Okay, sure.
Africa.
Yeah.
It's in Africa. It's Egypt. It's kind of ridiculous to say there was no written language.
Well,
so I'm just trying to get you to
Sure.
you know,
Egyptians are not Africans.
if I'm not pushing back, the internet will. So
Egyptians are not racial Africans. When I say African, I'm saying sub-Saharan Africans.
Sub-Saharan. Okay.
Black people because it is a different race. In sub-Saharan Africa, and Europeans did not penetrate that until late 19th century. They didn't have any of this. To the extent that you have infrastructure in Africa, it's from the Muslims in the Sahel and the Maghreb in northern Africa, where the Arabs colonized. And then you had, Carthage and Egypt, you had ancient civilizations. But sub-Saharan Africa, they didn't have that. You take these people out of that land and put them here, and they're enslaved people. You let them free in a modern, liberal republic. They're not going to succeed. It's not going to go well for them. And that was one of the arguments against abolition.
Frederick Douglass, Robert Smalls, Harriet Tubman. Think of all your great, African thinkers in the early 20th century. Think of the Black Enlightenment. Think of Zora Neale Hurston, all the artists, et cetera, et cetera. So, that just black people aren't going to do well. Well, some of them did quite well.
And people said if you free them without any assimilation, without any kind of process for them to be acclimated, they're going to die. And that's exactly what happened. Many of the bottom 10% of the lowest IQ Africans just died off for generations. And it had a, pardon the expression, but it had a eugenic effect, because over time, if the weakest are dying off, that's one argument for why blacks in America have a standard deviation higher IQ than the blacks in sub-Saharan Africa. So, so I do believe there is something intrinsic going on there. And what makes people uncomfortable about this is the idea that it's unchangeable. There's something about, and this is why I'm a Catholic, we do have an inherent desire for universalism. We do believe that there's a common humanity and a common human community and all of that. We hate the idea that we're born a certain way and we can never change. And that's just the way it is. And we even think about this in terms of, it's become not so popular these days to tell children, you can be whatever you want to be. Because we know that's not the case. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people are smart, some dumb, some ugly, some handsome. That's why, by the way, incel-dumb is a big part of this also.
So you believe these are immutable characteristics that are assigned at birth?
I think that, yes.
For the most part.
Things like race, all those attributes are immutable and unchangeable. And
But they have changed. Just factually speaking, they have changed.
They change over time, over the generations.
Okay, so then you don't think it's immutable, because if this was an immutable
individual person.
Okay, so you're saying that if you are born at this space and time as a Black person in America, here is the cards that you're dealt with, and you can't change that over time.
Something like IQ does not change. No, it doesn't change wildly.
Okay. So what I would argue is nutrition's effect on IQ. So nutrition plays a profound role in shaping cognitive function and intelligence across the lifespan, particularly during critical development stages. Research indicates that both the quality and quantity of nutrients intake can significantly impact brain development and function, with implications for IQ scores. So I would say early childhood nutrition is wildly important for IQ. What is it? Maternal nutrition effect on fetal IQ. Maternal nutrition during pregnancy significantly influences fetal brain development and consequently long-term cognitive outcomes, including IQ. So we should maximize good food for pregnant women. We should maximize food for children. Early childhood education effect on IQ. Early childhood education can have a positive effect on a child's cognitive development and consequently on their IQ scores, particularly in the long term. So ECE is a way to attack IQ. And then finally, the Flynn effect. So Flynn effect. So the Flynn effect is an observed phenomenon of rising IQ scores across generations, first identified by researcher James Flynn in the 1980s. His analysis of IQ tests, particularly among children in various countries, revealed significant increases in scores over time. And if I remember correctly, it's bottomed out now, where we only gain a certain amount of increased IQ over time. But since the early 20th century, we've increased scores by around 15 points. So we have two options here. And I'm actually going to go full screen for this. To the racialists, the racists, which I say as a descriptive term, we have two options here. I've just shown you that maternal nutrition, early childhood education, childhood nutrition can all positively impact IQ. And since the early 20th century, we have raised average IQ in the developed world by 15 points. This is attributed to people thinking more imaginatively. If you asked somebody in the early 20th century, what did you have for breakfast yesterday? Or excuse me, how would you feel if you didn't have breakfast? They would say, I did have breakfast. And they'd be like, okay, but what if you didn't? How would you feel? A early 20th century person would say, I did have breakfast. That doesn't make sense. Shut up. Because in the early 20th century, it was very common to think practically. But as industrialization has taken over, as technology has taken over, we've increasingly thought imaginatively. And so that is correlated with an increase in IQ. And so the whole point of it is we have two options here. There's a cross in the road. If we're racist or racialist, there's two options. Segregation, which means that you let the Black community do whatever it does and fuck them and they can figure it out, which, by the way, I think is just going to extend misery for our co-nationalists, people in the United States of America we should care about. The other option is maximize the environmental factors that affect IQ and then increase the material well-being of people in the Black community and work on the sociological issues that have plagued them for generations, and then hopefully reduce human suffering over time. Those are the two options. I'm just telling you, regardless of whether or not, let's say that there was truly an average IQ difference of 5 or 10 points between West Africans and Northern Europeans, and it was just immutable, nothing you can do can change it. I am still going to pick the let's minimize human suffering, let's increase maternal nutrition, let's increase childhood nutrition, let's increase access to early childhood education, and let's improve the lot of our fellow citizens. If you don't agree on that, I kind of think you're a fucking asshole. Just being real. And I think Nick is kind of a fucking asshole because I think he pushes for the segregationist argument because he thinks that it's immutable, unchangeable, and we should ultimately just exist in different tribes.
It only changes genetically over. IQ is a big one, and that changes. That's a genetic trait. And so that can change over the generations, but not, you can't take an individual that's 75 IQ, which is the average in West Africa, and take.
AF Racing says you were still 30 minutes behind on that when I said it was in reference to someone confusing regulation with training. Regulation means training. If you can look up a whole bunch of different historical contemporary references in reference to the American Indian Wars, where they're talking about like the Cherokee and the Comanche and the Apache being well regulated. They obviously didn't mean that they had a whole bunch of laws and rules written about the way that the Comanche and the Apache and the Cherokee conducted war. They were obviously talking about them being well trained or well disciplined. Sacred Snow says, yeah, but have you considered that maybe the African birth rate should go down to less than 1 for 1 to 3 generations so we can purge AIDS rather than just using modern medicine to weed it out over time? /sarcastic. Thank you for the sarcastic.
Them to 100.
So 2 dumb people can't produce a smart person.
I believe they can actually.
Yeah.
But
So does that kind of debunk your?
no, because it's rare that that happens. But IQ is a heritable trait, so it's unlikely that that happens.
Okay.
And do you not recognize that there's group differences in IQ? Or?
I think that there's group differences, but
Okay.
I wouldn't say, and the reason why I'm pushing back on this is because those perspectives that you hold, Thomas Sowell did a really good job debunking that.
Mm.
And I think the book.
And what is it? Not just that, but Asians and Jews have the highest IQ out of any racialized group. And guess what both of those societies have had? Millennia of written language and emphasis on academics. So there's no reason to think that over the next few centuries or millennia, an emphasis on literacy and academics couldn't produce positive results.
Book is called Intellectuals and Race, and he opens up and makes a very sound argument that these characteristics are not immutable and that it can be your environment. And he kind of goes back and discusses, like, you know, who had the highest IQ and who now has the highest IQ. And so I just disagree with you fundamentally, but you have a right to have that perspective.
So you don't think that there's group differences on average between the races?
I think, just to be clear, I think there would be group differences if you took it, like we were talking about, an American versus somebody who graduates college in Europe. There'd be tremendous differences. I
Not
truly,
tremendous, but yeah, there would
there'd
be slight differences,
yeah.
but you don't
So
think
I
that
think
racially there's differences between races?
I think, yeah, because we have huge differences culturally. So going to your point of saying, I don't want to live in a black neighborhood, well, neither does LeBron James when he gets money, right?
Right.
And there's a reason for that,
Mhm.
because there is something that's happening culturally in Black America that's been going on for a very long time. But that thing, I would argue, didn't exist in.
What about in Africa and Haiti? I mean, they're killing and eating each other in Africa and Haiti. Everywhere where they are, you have these problems.
Yeah, I'd like to look into, and I'm pleading ignorant, but I've heard some things about what happened in Haiti and what the Clinton Foundation did there. So I think I'd have to look more into the history of Haiti.
Short Stack Goblin says, I appreciate your goal of reading everything, but we need a better system for when you get one guide and there's a 20-minute delay for you to get to fight with us chat arslers. No. Wrong. I will fight as I feel.
To be able to push back on that at all. I don't.
Cornelius Cadre says Cotter has no clue about racial differences. Never go full libtard. You know, Cornelius, you are the least insightful groyper in my chat. You have no idea about anything.
Don't think I agree with that.
What about all of Africa then? There's not one country in sub-Saharan Africa that's successful. Not one. They're all least developed countries. They're all
So Bud123 says North Koreans have lower IQs than South Koreans. I'm pretty sure that's actually true. Let's go ahead and pull that up. So North Korean versus South Korean IQ. Ooh, higher. North Koreans are smarter than Americans, which is funny. Comparing the average IQ of North Korean and South Korean is not a straightforward task due to the vast differences in their societies and access to information. Estimates for North Korea are often based on assumptions and indirect evidence rather than standardized testing across the population. South Korea consistently ranks among the countries with the highest average IQ. Some sources suggest an average IQ of 107.54, which is cool. There's scarce data for North Korea. However, it's cited that average IQ for North Koreans range from 87 to 104 in previous studies. So yeah, so there's a limited amount of data between North Korea and South Korea. And bear in mind that these are societies that have only diverged within the past 80 years. And it looks like there's between a 3 and 30-point difference between North Koreans and South Koreans, which, by the way, I would say is like fundamentally environmental. Like it's all environmental. And then what's interesting too, North Korean tall versus North Korean versus South Korean height. Check this shit out. It's actually bananas. The South Koreans are on average 1 to 3 inches shorter. And I know this is an exaggeration. Obviously, this is an exaggeration. This is probably a particularly short North Korean. But look at this, dude. There's the Chad American who's been eating, red meat and wheat for centuries, if not millennia. He's the biggest. He shadows over the South Korean, who looks like it's like Emperors and the Primarchs from 40K. He looks like he just started eating, wheat and beef. And so as a result, he has become a Asian clone of the American. And then here's the North Korean, who is like a full 6 inches shorter than both of them. But, obviously, this is a change that's only happened since the 1950s. So it's not going to be a substantive difference. Right? Like it's only going to be a few inches. It's only going to be a few IQ points. But you just have to understand that the environment is a predictive factor for health. And there are going to be things that correlate, like height, like IQ, 100%.
All failed states.
This kind of reminds me, and we could kind of flesh out this conversation together, and I'm not perhaps ready to have it fully, but I do remember going back to...
You can't start eating better and get better IQ. No shit. What I read was talking about early childhood development and early childhood education. No shit. If your mom smokes, you guys should probably understand this. If your mom smokes fucking Newports and eats fucking fried food, then you're not going to get the same fetal development as if your mom eats granola and blueberries. This is self-evident.
Dave Smith, where he was conceding a point on, well, all of these other Middle Eastern countries, no, you wouldn't want to live there. You'd want to live in Israel. In my mind, I'm going, well, because you just keep bombing the crap out of them if they ever try to get ahead. I remember watching this clip of him saying that, going, why don't these countries get ahead? And kind of going back in my mind to the Gaddafi speech, where he was speaking essentially about, here's what we got to do in Libya to get ahead. Here's what we're going to do with the dollar, and we're going to be progressive and this and that. And they killed him. And then what happened to those Libyan refugees?
No. God, you guys this is you. This is you. This is you. Pancakes, waffles, tweet. This is fucking you. This bread and circuses. Fucking try. Twitter, the only place where well-articulated sentences will get misinterpreted. You can say, I like pancakes, and somebody will say, so you hate waffles. No, bitch, that's a whole new sentence. What the fuck are you talking about? Bread and Circuses says, are you arguing that a blank slate, there's no intrinsic average IQ difference between the races? Nope, never said that. I said that you can make a maximal environment that increases IQ. That's what I said. Cornelius says, liberals like Connor don't care about the truth, just want to win an argument like Bosch or Destiny said. Shut the fuck up. You're a fucking idiot, Cornelius. You're the dumbest groyper I have. Depressing.
Suddenly they're now pouring into, just like he said was going to happen, that they were now
See, Bud123 gets it. Grill hotism positively impacts IQ. Indeed.
pouring into the European continent, and Europeans are complaining, who are these people? And so the question is, are we allowing, because I'm like, Africa's a pretty rich country. Like, why aren't Africans controlling the diamond trade? Who's taking all of the diamonds so that they can't control the diamond trade? And how long have these people been doing that, being essentially culture vultures? That's kind of the journey that I've been on now in terms of really trying to go back and look into history to see what's happened. And I never trust myself when I have a perspective now, because I realize how much of my opinions and beliefs were shaped by the public school system. And so I don't think you're right. I think that there has been a very sophisticated effort to, just like you would say now, in terms of people that are intentionally attacking Anglo-Saxons. I'm just learning about that there were these books that were written to, we must genocide the Anglo-Saxons, that were going on for a lot longer than I realized. History didn't begin with World War II, but I think it would take a lot of time to kind of unpack that.
Yeah.
Like, are we stopping people from getting ahead just because, I don't know.
That just sounds, I mean, being honest with you, that just sounds to me like a left-wing argument when they say, why don't these countries get ahead?
Whatever, it's hard enough to face my own mortality without facing the death of my entire people. Dude, you fucking whatever. You're so fucking crazy. Mixed race, baby, and parents. This is a happy guy. This is a happy woman. They have 3 kids. Her people didn't die because she has 3 happy kids. These are her people, you psycho. The black people didn't die and the white people didn't die because they had a mixed race kid. Are you stupid? Are you an idiot? They're not dead. They have a new kid. These are their kids. They're human beings who participate in society and work jobs and pay taxes and fucking take care of their families. You think that she views herself as dead? You think he views himself as dead? Are you an idiot? What's your problem? How about you face your own mortality? How about you go find a woman who's willing to tolerate your autistic ass, and then you go get a fucking kid? And if they're fucking Mexican or black or Asian or whatever, you just go, okay, fuck it. You're attractive. I love you. I'm happy that I get to have kids. And then you take care of your kids and you love your kids. How about that, you fucking psycho? Jesus Christ. My entire people are gone. No, they're not. They're right there. She is his person. He is her person. And that's their person. She is his person. He is her person. And those are their people, you fucking lunatic. What's wrong with you? Cornelius, I'm going to scroll. You have like one more cringe comment and then I'm going to ban you because you're actually too stupid to function. You don't even bring up good points. Like, at least with Justin, at least with, who do we have? We had like Razzle Smasher and Razzle something else. They bring up points to contend with, but all you say is, if you don't agree with Nick, you're stupid. Cornelius, you are stupid. You don't even understand what Nick's saying. You don't understand what I'm saying. Like, you don't even understand the arguments. You just found an online political tribe to hang out with. You're actually quite stupid. So whatever like claims to like collective greatness that the groypers are currently claiming, you're not a part of it. You're like their dumb little brother that they let tag along. It's kind of embarrassing, to be honest.
Colonialism. You're a colonizer. It's like, okay, but when we got there, they had no development. When we got to Africa, they had no technological.
Which also isn't true. They had their own agricultural process. And as a matter of fact, the Bantu were agriculturalists who outcompeted the Khoisan. It's frustrating to explain, but it's okay. Let's go.
Development.
So you think that even if we weren't at war, And sure, you could say that you think that's a leftist argument. I would only push back on that because I've learned so much about just like recent history that I didn't know.
Do I think immigration should be stopped? No, I think it should be controlled.
But you think that the Middle East, like if we had done nothing in terms of the Middle East, that they would just be savages and just be like, you know, America didn't do anything it doesn't set anything backwards. And you're just like bombing a place.
Yeah, kind of. I think that we.
So hold on. Conservative liberalism actually makes a good point. North Korea versus South Korea is addressing a floor, not a ceiling. You can raise floors with environmental conditions. North Koreans are shorter too. These are related things. Yes, I'm arguing we should raise the floor. That's what I'm arguing.
We did set them back because when they don't have political order, it prevents development and investment and things like that. But, you know, again, when you look at the antecedents of all these, you know, the history didn't start, like you said, with World War II in the 20th century. There's a reason that European civilization created this enormous gap between them and everybody else. And I don't think it was that it was white supremacy or it was unfair or something like that. I think it's because Europeans are smarter. I think that on average, Europeans
So to
are
use your
smarter.
argument against you, that could be said about Ashkenazis. So if you're sitting here saying, I believe in some conspiracy and that it's a coordinated effort and blah, 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 they could look at you and say, that's a leftist argument. We're just smarter.
I think they are smart.
They
I
are
think
smarter.
they're
The smartest.
Well, I would say this. I would say they're probably as smart as the smartest white race. But the difference between the Jews and the white people is that they work as a team. And so if you look at, for example, things like transportation, white people invented every mode of transportation, railroad, cars, airplanes, all of it. When you look at fields of knowledge, white people invented all that, chemistry, anthropology, all that stuff. So white people really did give birth to the modern world in a major way. Jewish people are high verbal IQ because they're lawyers, they're rabbis. That's what a rabbi is a lawyer. That's what the Talmud is. It's a lawyerly back and forth. And so they're skilled at some things, and you're not wrong. They're extremely educated. They're extremely intelligent. They're a unique case where, 2% of the population overrepresented 2,000%. Are they 2,000% smarter? Answer is no. Because if you look at the standardized testing, the top scores in the high school standardized tests are almost all Asians in math and science. Asians aren't overrepresented in power. It's Jewish people. So Jewish people are not, proportionally as more intelligent as they are more overrepresented. And that goes to their real superpower, which is they're an organized minority. An organized minority will be the disorganized majority. As far as Africa is concerned, they didn't have the wheel. We got there, they didn't have the wheel. And it's unfortunate. It's not anything that people are happy about. I don't believe that makes Africans inferior.
Charles Burrows says, I'm 40 minutes behind listening to Connor being scolded by chat for responding to 30-minute old messages. Lol. 70 minutes in my future, I might see him respond to this message. Well, I just did, Charles Burrows. Quick show time before we continue, just because, we are getting later in the day. Please like the stream, engage in chat. There's lots of funny, interesting people there. Also, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. Watch the VOD videos if you miss out on a stream and comment on them. I'm not going to lie. Effectively, listen, guys, I'm going to be real here. The things that perform on the VOD so far are Destiny, Nick Fuentes, random drama. So if you're like Connor, I like it when you actually deal with real contentious topics. And I like it when you watch Mehdi Hassan or the Young Turks or something like that. Then you're going to need to engage with those VODs. Like even just like clicking the video, running it in the background and commenting on it, you're going to have to comment on the content you want to see. Because if I keep getting 5,000, 7,000, 10,000 views for Destiny content, and I keep getting 200 views for, Young Turks content, I'm obviously going to follow where the algorithm pushes me. So just a warning to VOD viewers. Watch what you want to see from the channel. Otherwise, it's going to become whatever's popular. That's how the algorithm works, guys. Sorry to share that.
But I do think that explains their relative level of development that has been persistent over centuries, millennia.
Yeah, I'd probably just disagree with that point altogether. Okay, so then at least you are agreeing that Jewish people are just born smarter.
Yeah, they're very high IQ. I don't know if they're smarter than white people, but they're...
Well, you have to, that's what the results say.
That's what some results say. Depends on what.
Sacred Snow says, I personally hate it when the Latin asses tempt me and my race into being genocided. Don't you hate that? Don't you hate that? I'm gonna Google Latina, and I'll leave the safe search on. Hold on, Latina woman. Let's see. Don't you hate that? Don't you hate when a combination of Spanish and indigenous woman just looks you in the eyes and just says, hey, I'm going to genocide you? Don't you hate that? Don't you hate when an indigenous woman says, hey, come over here. Let me genocide you and make you some food from my home country. You know, let me make you some corn and some beans and some fajitas. Don't you hate that? Don't you hate when you get genocided by Latinas? Shame. Shame. Shame on you for getting genocided.
Results you're looking at.
Okay. I thought that was kind of the, maybe I'm just reading it in one term, but I'm pretty sure that I read somewhere that like Ashkenazis have the highest IQs.
They like to embellish that. And there's different kinds of IQ. I think China.
Whatever, says Sai, I'm talking about the English gene pool. Mixing isn't a problem as long as the entire population gets replaced by mass immigration. Why don't you just hang out with other whites, bro? Just go hang out with other whites. Do you have a kid? Do you have a partner? Do you have a wife? Dude, like, finding someone to love and having a kid is infinitely more important than your existential panic over Middle Eastern and North Africans infiltrating the United Kingdom. Okay? Your homicide rate is less than half of that of the United States of America. Go find some like-minded whites and play Warhammer, okay?
These people probably have the highest IQ, Chinese or Japanese.
But how do you pick and choose what you believe and what you don't believe and then form a basis like, well, I definitely believe that Black people are dumb.
Cornelius Cadre says the UN has an official paper called Replacement Migration for All White Nations. So how is it a conspiracy? Because if you actually read it, it talks about how declining birth rates in the West and the economic impacts are so disastrous that what you need is immigration as a stopgap in order to make sure that economies don't fucking implode, Cornelius. So the people who wrote those papers didn't say, we're the Jews, and because we want to, turn everybody into a race-mixed slave race of cappuccino debt slaves, we're going to make sure that Americans get tempted by big booty Latinas, and we're going to make sure that Europeans get cucked by Chad Arabs. That's not what's in the fucking paper. What the paper says is that the Western world has a demographic implosion where instead of being at replacement birth rate of 2.15, we're currently hovering around 1.5. And effectively, all of our economic models are based on growth. So without that demographic growth, we're going to implode our retirement systems. We're going to implode our social welfare systems. So in order to make sure that we don't totally destroy our economies and effectively force old people to eat cat food, we're going to let immigrants come into our countries so our economic models work until we figure out automation. That's what the paper says, you fucking idiot. Sorry for cussing so much, but you're actually the dumbest groyper. You're like the token groyper. You're the, when it comes to the groypers, who is it? It's like Officer Doofus. Officer Doofus, Doofy, Scary Movie. This is you, okay? The groypers are the police department, and they're letting you, the fucking idiot, tag-along, fake star dumbass, you're tagging along, okay? This is you. This is you to the groypers. You are the dumbest groyper.
But I totally don't necessarily
now.
believe, I'm obviously being a little bit hyperbolic here, but I totally don't necessarily believe that Ashkenazis are the smartest. Like, how do you...
Well, I said they're probably among the smartest races. As to who's the smartest, it's tough to say. And I think that Jewish people do embellish that for obvious reasons.
Bud123 says, no, we should argue to bring McDonald's to North Korea to feed the masses and make $1 billion. Yes.
Reasons. Now, there are some studies that say that Ashkenazi Jews do have the highest average IQ, and that does exist.
Yeah, but so then for
I'm
me,
skeptical
the
of it.
reason why I'm skeptical of it all, to be honest with you, is because I'm skeptical of history, full stop. Right. So when you're like, well, this is what
do
we
you mean,
did.
all of history, or
Skeptical of history, full stop, because we're living in a present right now where they're lying about what happened yesterday. And then when I realized, like, when you completely remove something that would obviously inform our perspectives in a different way, as I covered on my show this week, like the Havara agreement between the Zionists and the Nazis, like that's kind of a pretty big thing to not teach people in school.
True Zealot for $5 says, for all the groypers, our DNA wouldn't combine to produce offspring if God didn't want us to race mix. Maybe y'all aren't as close to God as you think. Yeah. It would be one thing with races if they produced like donkeys. Like I'm pretty sure donkeys are sterile. Are donkeys sterile? Or like a mule or something? Donkeys are capable of reproduction, on the other hand, are the sterile offspring of a male donkey. Mules, on the other hand, are the sterile offspring of a male donkey and a female horse. The reason for mule sterility is related to their different chromosomes, 62 for donkeys and 64 for horses and 63 for mules. So what's interesting about mules, mule sterility, is the fact that mules are a combination of a male donkey and a female horse, and they themselves cannot procreate. So it would be one thing to say, like, if races like produced sterility in the subsequent generation, then I'd be like, oh, maybe there's something to this race thing where we're just so distant as a species that we can no longer interbreed. And that's not true. Not only is it not true, but I'm pretty sure like mixed race folk have like they have like health advantages. Do mixed race people live longer? In terms of longevity and health, the relationship between mixed race individuals and life expectancy is complex and not easily categorized as simply living longer or living shorter than those of single racial backgrounds. Research suggests that several factors include the health and longevity of mixed race individuals. Genetic diversity, greater genetic diversity in individuals of mixed backgrounds may offer some health advantages, such as potentially a stronger immune system and a lower risk for certain diseases, according to some research. So obviously there's going to be mixed results, because you could get, there are probably people who get advantages from both races and therefore are more healthy. But there's also probably disadvantages, because imagine if you get two disadvantages from your mixed race parents. Imagine if they both give you disadvantages, you'd probably be fucked. But theoretically, it offers advantages. Chaitanya Manuja says, before colonization, India was one of the richest nations. Well, India should probably get better at fighting, considering that the Muslims showed up and kicked the shit out of India, and then the Brits showed up and they kicked the shit out of India. So, you know, who is it? Who's the Indians? The Sikh. The Sikh had the right idea, S-I-K-H. That religion was effectively like a warrior religion. Were the Sikh a military organization? While Sikhism is primarily a religion, the Khalsa, a brotherhood of initiated Sikhs, has a strong military tradition and played a significant role in Sikh history as a disciplined fighting force. The Khalsa was formed by Guru Gobind Singh in 1699 as a military order to defend the Sikh faith and community. The Sikh Khalsa army was a military force of the Sikh Empire and played a crucial role in its expansion and defense. So yeah. So the Hindu should have been more like the Khalsa or the Sikh, and maybe you guys wouldn't have gotten the shit kicked out of you so bad. Sorry for the historical racism, but I do think it's funny.
That would maybe inform and make us ask some questions. When you totally remove like a German genocide and only focus on one genocide, or don't focus on speaking about the Bolshevik Revolution, I don't question. I now have a lot of questions about history, full stop. And so he who prints the textbook is king.
Agreed.
And so if you are coming up with a concept like, well, this is an immutable trait, and I know because I read, or I learned this at school, or this textbook, or I read this book, he who prints the textbook is king. And I'm kind of learning that right now in terms of Hollywood Babylon, the relationship that the deep state has had with publishing agencies for a reason. You know this, I know this. You can't even get your book published.
Right.
If you want to get your book published because they're controlling the press, that's kind of been a running theme. Certainly was the reason why the Russian Tsar, they were pamphleteers at that time, but like certainly was the reason that he got overthrown was that they realized the power of the press. And so when people have perspectives like you and they're base it on like historical knowledge, this person invented the wheel. I'm like, I don't really know what's up and what's down, to be honest with you.
Whatever says, I will tell you, people are rioting and very concerned for their children's futures. Wrong. They were rioting last year. They stopped giving a shit in the past 6 months. In the UK, thousands of girls were and are raped. Kill the rapists. It's that easy. You think I don't know about Pakistani grooming gangs? Yeah, if a guy is using ethno-religious bigotry as an excuse in order to recruit and sexually enslave European girls, kill that person. Okay? At minimum, incarcerate them. At maximum, kill them. You have my full blessing. Now, the United Kingdom government is so cucked that they're not going to do that. But I guarantee you, if there was an ethno-religious supremacist movement in the United States that had sexually enslaved Native Americans, and by natives, I just mean the way that the racists were using it, European descended Americans, along the lines of ethno-religious bigotry, there would be vigilantism. 100% in the United States. Absolutely.
I don't even believe in the moon landing.
Tartaria.
So, there you go. There's another one. There's something there. That's very funny. That would.
I'm not kidding.
But the point being is that, yeah. So the more that I learn, the one thing that I learn is that we know very little. And so I would never make a sweeping conclusion like that confidently. It could be that.
Cornelius Cadre says Connor has a Jewish boss or a brown wife. Nope, neither.
That some groups are more evil. They're willing to do stuff that you wouldn't do. They're willing to take your entire culture, your ideas, and purport that it was theirs. And that's something that we're kind of tackling in my book club right now, because we're realizing that the elites very much believed in this sort of Kabbalistic sexual ritual magic, but actually they stole it from Egyptians. And like Sigmund Freud was obsessed with the Egyptians, and we talked about Aleister Crowley. And so the more I learn about what they were obsessed with, I'm like, okay, so you're supposed to be like the brightest people in the world and you've had wealth forever. But I think you're willing to do more that most people that just have like a discerning, I don't know, just have the Holy Spirit, like, just wouldn't do. And so does the most evil person get to the top? And then they get to say, well, we're just like what's going to happen, for example, bring it back to what we've been discussing. And I will give a specific example. I won't even mince words here. It shocked me to learn that Armand Hammer, you know Armand Hammer, the actor?
Yeah.
He is racially Jewish. You know, sometimes it's race, sometimes it's ethnicity, sometimes it's religion, who knows? But Armie Hammer's family backstory is that his however many great-grandfathers named Armand Hammer was named Arm and Hammer, literally, okay? Because he was considered Stalin and Vladimir Lenin's favorite Jew, okay? Fascinating. And so what he would do is he would go between Russia and America. He would set up like all of these, his father was Julius Hammer, and he established the Diamond District. So you're telling me that when Christians were being mass murdered and their belongings were being taken, you got these guys going back and forth, establishing districts in America. They're peddling art. He started peddling art. He started peddling diamonds. I think that's stolen. Okay. So if our American history is going to teach us that, like, oh, like the reason they established Armand Hammer's fortune is like they opened all these art galleries, it's stolen. You stole this from Christians that were being murdered and had all their stuff taken. We can apply that logic to what's happening in Palestine. Everyone thinks about, okay, it's very clearly what's happening is an ethnic cleansing. Where's all that stuff going? Are we going to in the future go, well, Palestinians just couldn't get ahead because, you know, they're just not that smart. You know, fundamentally, if you look at the IQ of Palestinian, the reason why they got.
And by the way, yeah, short stack goblin, I caught you. Connor is almost catching up. Quick, everyone, spam triggering stuff. Yeah, exactly. I caught you. I caught you. So that means that since I caught you, I get to chill. Like the stream, engage in chat. There's lots of really funny, psychotic people who piss me off in chat. Comment on the VODs. Super chats if you got them. Memberships if you got them. Yeah, Herkimer says, wait until somebody tells her about the Germans looting the Jews. Yeah, this is where, like, for me, it's conspiracy brain. I feel like Candace already has a natural conspiracist thing. So she's just going to be like, oh, the Jews were establishing, the Diamond District, and there were all these people getting killed in Europe. Clearly, they were being raped, robbed, and murdered, and it was the Jews who did it. Now, obviously, she's never going to own it that explicitly. However, she already implied it. And then not just that, let's just invert that. The reason why I don't like calling out the most grievous sins in history and assigning it specifically to ethno-religious groups is because oftentimes, as soon as you point the finger in one direction, you can find analogs within your own tribe. For the Crusades, you have the expansions of the Caliphate. For the expansions of the Caliphate, you have the Crusades. For the Jewish blood libel or whatever, where they're like killing kids and poisoning wells and all that kind of shit, you have biological warfare and torture implemented by the Christians and the Muslims throughout their conquests. So it's like whatever grievous sins can be pointed to for the ancestors of our enemies, we can find grievous sins of our own. So maybe we should all stop being dicks. That would be my philosophy.
Got ahead is because they weren't that smart and the Israelis were just really smart, or no, the Israelis were just evil. And so I am not comfortable with the conclusion.
Sen Patty says, what if the Jews are behind the anti-Semitism movement, playing all sides so they always come out on top?
That you have arrived at, because I just pay attention to what's happening now and what limited research that I've done. I'm like, well, some people are just a little more evil. They'll rewrite the books, and 50, maybe 100 years from now, they're going to say the Palestinians never had that land, and it was really a matter of people lying, and it was anti-Semitic, and we'll be none the wiser.
Right.
Fair?
I disagree. I just fundamentally disagree. I think that, it's such a one-sided, it's unfortunate, but it's so one-sided, just a chronic lack of development and persistent underclass status and lack of contributions to mankind. I mean, certainly in the arts and in athletics, but no inventions, no philosophers, no true great masterpieces, anything like that, in terms of fine art, really. And then you have the whole planet is like this. I mean, if half of Africa was super developed or halfway developed and the other half wasn't, maybe you'd have an argument, but it's.
I mean, you could argue that North Africa is super developed and West Africa isn't. I think what Nick is asking for, though, is specifically when it comes to the Bantu language group. So when you're talking about West Africa and South Africa, that's what he's talking about. Now, the argument from West African and South African historians who are sympathetic to West Africans is effectively, let's do a topographical map real quick. Let's do a little bit of geopol. So Africa maps. So the argument is that this entire area, what's up, baby? I didn't see it. Oh, cool. So the argument is that this entire area is heavily jungled. And so the primary crop was the yam. And there's actually like a history of yam cultivation starting in West Africa and then moving its way east as they exhausted the soil. And so that eventually started with like the Bantu migration into South Africa, where the reason why there's the Khoisan, who are the grass peoples, who are effectively like grass hunters. They hunted in the savannah. The Bantu language group eventually outcompeted because they were agriculturally cultivating. That might be redundant, but they were cultivating the yam. And so the yam cultivators spread east and south, and they outcompeted the Khoisan, who are the grass peoples. And so while this was happening, probably at the peak of the domination of the Bantu, there were cultural interchanges between North Africa and West Africa, but it was fairly limited because Sahara effectively acted like another ocean. This entire region has so little water that West Africa was substantively cut off from the rest of the world. Like East Africa, sure, but when you're talking about the Bantu language group, they were pretty substantively cut off. And then you have colonialism and decolonization, which were both disastrous politically, economically, and culturally. So it's effectively like, at least for West African sympathetic historians, they say that by the time that the Africans were kind of advanced or advancing, they were being colonized and decolonized. So, yep.
Whether they're socialist or capitalist, whether they got colonized or not, whether they got freed from slavery in 1800 or in 1860, or it's the same story everywhere. There's not one written language among them. You know, you talk about who controls the printing press.
Arabic in you know, Timbuktu and Mali, but he's going to argue that that's a North African language.
They don't have books. They don't have words to put in the books. And I think that, you know, it's a sad fact of the world, but it's something we have to deal with. And to me, that's the only conclusion that satisfies. And don't get me wrong, I get where you're coming from. I'm not, you know.
History is oftentimes not satisfactory.
I'll give you an example. My family lived in Chicago for 4 or 5 generations. And my parents and my grandmother, they had a security firm in the city. They taught cops and security guards how to shoot their guns and gave them licenses and things like that. And almost all their clientele were black. And they, when I was growing up, this was impressed upon me at an early age. They always said the older generations in Chicago, when my grandmother was growing up in the projects, when my parents were running this business in the 80s and 90s, they said they were the most polite, the most pious, the most considerate. Right. Some of them couldn't read, though. You know, they would come in and not be able to read, but they were less dysfunctional than my family. You know, my grandmother, her mother had mental illness, and she would look outside the window in the projects and see a black family across the way, and they were sitting around the table holding hands saying grace, and it was an intact family. So I completely agree with you. So, obviously, there's a cultural destruction. Obviously, there's a cultural decline, but I think that was constant, even though the older generation was more genteel. I think that, honestly, that came from oppression. That came from a...
Oh, I wasn't ready for that one. That was a nice little curveball to the face. Oh, man. Okay. 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 Listen, if you think that early childhood education and forced nutritional access is oppression, then I'm all for it. And then if you think that a public school education forcing people to be genteel and socialize is oppression, then I'm all for that form of oppression. Okay? Whatever makes people happy, healthy, socialized, given academic opportunity, and given employment opportunity, I'm for it. So Nick's saying that that's the oppression of the white folk who forced the black folk to be decent, and that there's been a cultural disintegration since. I'm for a new form of what he will call social oppression into liberal normality. Weird sentences.
Society where they were the minority. There was racism, there was abuse, there was segregation, and I think that made black people meek. And if you look, the out-of-wedlock birth rate started to blow up, not after Great Society in the late 60s, but in the 50s during the Civil Rights era. And I think that that was sort of a regression to the mean moment. And, you know, again, I think that it's not that black people can't be good people. There aren't smart black people, or there aren't, you know, incredible black people. I'm sitting across from one right now, or yay, and everything like that. But on the whole, on average, and there's billions of black people, they do have that lower level of development, and I think that's why they underperform. And, you know,
yeah, I think it's totally ignorant. We can disagree on that, but I think it would be the same as saying, like, we look at women today who are all a bunch of hoes, and like that's kind of just become the thing. Like, this is what women are, and then kind of looking at this moment in time and saying, like, this is just who they are. It's like women, as soon as they come of age, they just want to like be on screen shaking their butts because they're all low IQ and they need men to do this or whatever. It's like, no. The culture has been corroding for a very long time. And I don't accept the argument that it's because women are women and that's just who they all are deep down on the inside. You know, I find that I do think that in time you might move away from that.
Okay.
Candace is the more rational person in this conversation. Oh, that hurts. That hurts me psychically.
Okay, I'm
we'll see.
open-minded. Yeah.
We'll see. Okay, so you are a racist. You accept that. You are anti-Semitic. I don't like actually using that word because even that is what I mean, like trickery, where it's like Semitic. Palestinians are Semitic.
Right.
So it's nothing more anti-Semitic than blowing up Palestinians. Are you a Jew hater?
No, I don't hate
Do you
anybody.
hate Jews?
I don't hate Jews. I don't hate anybody.
You don't hate anybody. Okay. And your faith, you don't find that saying that you're a Catholic while also saying that you don't believe that whites and blacks should be married, or you don't believe in interracial marriage for whatever reason, that doesn't conflict with your Catholicism?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
So for me, what I would want to hear Nick address is there's obviously that quote from his little like groyper rally where he was like, they want to make us die in a holy war, so we will make them die in a holy war. I would like to hear an explanation for that rhetoric. Yes, I agree with you, Sen Patty. He's something. He's something.
But you said that like that's not a Catholic perspective.
It's not a sin. The Catholic Church doesn't say it's a sin to mix races, but there have been various Catholic authors that have said that it's not conducive to a long-term marriage to mix races because...
And there's also like people use a quote from the Old Testament about like the nations and their people and their language. And they say effectively that God has ordained the nation state as a vehicle for human happiness. That's where they use like a very few cryptic Old Testament sentences about the nations as a way to say like, well, we shouldn't mix because we are the nations.
You have this clash, you have this dissonance between cultures, between different upbringings. And so they say if the selfless goal of a marriage is to rear children and you want to make that as conducive as possible, then you should marry within your race. It's not a sin if you don't.
Which Catholic author?
I don't know off the top of my head, but there are Catholic theologians that have said that. It's not conducive to a long-term marriage and stable.
Okay, jumping in here, even...
All right, and I'm jumping out. I understand there might be like another spicy moment in here where Nick basically says like, oh, like, well, when are you getting married? When are you going to live the trad life? And he's like, fuck off, Candace, I do what I want. And then all the groypers are saying on social media effectively that men can have children and build families at a later age. And so as a result, you know, who cares what Nick does? And Nick is so important to the Christian nationalist movement that, you know, he should be given further license to not fully live the ideal of a married man. So, yeah. Justin says he doesn't believe sub-Saharans can behave well on their own. Okay. No one can behave well on their own, Justin. So, once again, I'm bringing this up. I am ethnically Irish. 200 years ago, my ancestors were mud-dwelling savages with 15 kids who drank a shitload and beat the fuck out of people, okay? The Irish people are known for effectively having lots of kids, being super Catholic, loving alcohol, and beating the shit out of people. That's what they're known for. They're known for being rebels during the Roman Republic and the Roman Imperial era. They're known for being rebels during the Anglo-Imperial era. So we all need something to civilize us. I just think that we could do that within society, and it's not that big of a deal. Herkimer says, oh, they cherry-picked the tidbits from the Bible too? Shocking. I know, right? Yeah, so let's go ahead and summarize, I guess, and close out. But I will read chat before I get out of here. Effectively, I'm happy that we took a look at it again. I'm happy we got into the race and IQ stuff. I think that anybody who does watch this and does consider themselves a groyper, they should look at IQ effects of maternal nutrition, infant nutrition, early childhood education, and the Flynn effect. And then you have to ask yourself a diverging question. So should we as Americans who live in a multi-ethnic, multiracial, multilinguistic state, should we segregate into different races and then just let black people do whatever black people do? And because of the material circumstances and history, let's face that, that's probably going to be a lot of unnecessary suffering. Or do we come together as Americans and we say, everyone who is a United States citizen is my brother, everybody is my brother in Christ. Therefore, we care about what other people do, and we're going to take care of them. And so therefore, you give people maximal access to optimal nutrition, especially during the early development of life. You give them a good education, you give them employment opportunities, and you try to create intact families through cultural pressure. I would argue for the latter. If you argue for the former, I think you're an asshole. I parasocially love you guys for hanging out, having a good time, enjoying the content, and donating. Seriously, it is greatly appreciated.